Hello guys, welcome to Fictional Vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was the SSS-Rank sage who mastered the floor of silence. Naruto x Freya x Ryuu Lion, DanMachi. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Sage's Arrival. The dungeon trembled. Deep on the 37th floor, known by veteran adventurers as the Floor of Silence, a group of exhausted explorers huddled together, weapons raised against the approaching horde of monsters. Their expedition had gone catastrophically wrong when a monster party ambushed them at a choke point. Now, backs against the wall, they prepared for their final stand. "We're not getting out of this one, are we?" A young mage clutched his cracked staff, magical energy nearly depleted. The party leader, a battle-scarred dwarf, tightened his grip on his axe. "Save your breath. If we're dying, let's at least take some of these bastards with us." The first wave of monsters, hulking bipedal creatures with elongated claws, charged forward. The adventurers braced themselves for impact. But the impact never came. A blinding flash of yellow light erupted between them and the monsters, followed by a shockwave that sent the creatures flying backward. When the light faded, a figure stood where nothing had been moments before, a young man with spiky blonde hair, strange whisker-like markings on his cheeks, and wearing an orange and black outfit unlike any adventure gear they'd seen. "Whoa," the stranger said, looking around with bright blue eyes. "This definitely isn't where I was a second ago." The monsters, recovering from their surprise, roared and charged again. The blonde man turned to face them, his posture relaxed but alert. "You guys might want to stand back," he called over his shoulder. Without waiting for a response, he flashed forward. His movements were almost too fast to track, a blur of orange and black as he tore through the first monster without even drawing a weapon. His palm struck the creature's chest, and it simply disintegrated. "What the hell?" The dwarf leader couldn't believe his eyes. "Is that magic?" The stranger moved through the monster horde like water, each strike precise and devastating. He created copies of himself, not illusions, but solid duplicates that fought with the same ferocity as the original. When a particularly large monster lunged at him, the stranger held out his hand and formed a spiraling sphere of energy that drilled through the creature's body. Within minutes, the floor was clear of monsters. The duplicates vanished in puffs of smoke, leaving only the original standing among the dissolving monster remains. He turned to the adventurers with a grin. "You guys okay?" They stared at him in stunned silence. The stranger rubbed the back of his head. "I'm Naruto, by the way. Naruto Uzumaki. Anyone want to tell me where exactly I am? Because I'm pretty sure this isn't the battlefield I was just on." Freya stood at her window in Babel Tower, her perfect features suddenly tensing. She placed one delicate hand against the glass, eyes widening slightly. "My lady?" Otter, her loyal captain, noticed the change immediately. "Something new has entered the dungeon," she whispered, a rare smile playing at her lips. "A soul unlike any I've ever seen." The goddess of beauty closed her eyes, focusing her divine senses. What she felt made her breath catch, a soul of brilliant gold, pulsing with vitality and power, yet with complex undercurrents of pain and determination. It called to her like a beacon. "Otter," she said softly, her eyes still closed. "Send Alan to the lower floors. I want information on any unusual adventurers." The Minotaur bowed. "Any specific floor, Lady Freya?" "The presence is strongest around the 37th floor." She opened her eyes, which gleamed with excitement. "The Floor of Silence has a new visitor, and I want him." Naruto walked alongside the adventurers he'd saved, listening as they explained this strange new world. The dungeon, the city of Ororio above it, adventurers, familiars, gods who walked among mortals, it was a lot to take in. "So let me get this straight," he said, stepping over a crack in the dungeon floor. "You guys dive into this monster-filled maze to collect magic stones, which you sell for money, all while trying not to die. The dwarf leader, who'd introduced himself as Gareth, nodded. That's the simplified version, yes. Though most of us do it to level up and become stronger. And these gods just hang out watching you risk your lives. They grant us blessings, engraving their fauna on our backs to help us grow stronger, explained the female warrior of the group. Without a fauna, no one could dive deeper than the upper floors. Naruto frowned. But I don't have one of these fauna things. The party exchanged glances. That's impossible, the mage said. No mortal could fight like you did without a blessing. Naruto shrugged. Where I come from, we don't have these god blessings. We train and develop our chakra, our life energy. And where exactly are you from? Gareth asked, eyeing him suspiciously. Before Naruto could answer, the floor beneath them rumbled. Not a normal dungeon tremor, this felt wrong. The air around them pulsed with strange energy. Naruto felt it immediately. Something's not right. He closed his eyes, entering sage mode in an instant. Golden pigmentation appeared around his eyes as he extended his senses. What he felt shocked him. The entire floor was saturated with natural energy, similar to what he used for sage mode, but with different properties. And it was reacting to his presence, resonating with his own chakra. We need to move, he said, opening his eyes. Now. The floor fractured beneath them, and darkness seeped through the cracks, not just absence of light, but something actively consuming it. Naruto created a dozen shadow clones instantly. Everyone grab onto one of me. As soon as they did, he activated his flying Raijin technique, teleporting the entire group to the stairway he'd sensed leading upward. The floor where they'd stood collapsed completely, revealing a pulsing void that didn't look like any dungeon level should. What in the gods' names was that? Gareth whispered. Naruto stared at the phenomenon, his sage senses picking up distortions in reality itself. That looks like some kind of dimensional rift. He'd seen similar effects during his battle with Kaguya. Almost like something tore through the fabric between worlds. Is that how you got here? Asked the female warrior. Naruto nodded slowly. Maybe. Last thing I remember, I was fighting this super powerful enemy who was messing with space-time jutsu. There was this huge explosion of energy, and next thing I knew, I was here. The rift below pulsed once more before collapsing in on itself, the floor regenerating at an accelerated rate, another oddity, according to the shocked expressions of his companions. The dungeon doesn't heal itself that quickly, Gareth said. Something's very wrong. Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that his arrival and this strange phenomenon were connected. I think I need to talk to someone who understands this dungeon better. That would be the guild, said Gareth. But first, we need to get back to the surface. The journey upward was surprisingly smooth. Naruto's shadow clone scouted ahead, eliminating threats before they reached the exhausted party. The adventurers watched in awe as he handled monsters that would normally require careful strategy with casual ease. You fight like a first-class adventurer, Gareth commented after Naruto dispatched a particularly nasty group of monsters. But your techniques are unlike anything I've seen. Where I come from, I'm what's called a shinobi, a ninja, Naruto explained, dispelling his shadow clones. The techniques I use are ninjutsu. And those copies of yourself? They're solid, not illusions. Shadow clone jutsu. Instead of creating a fake image, I actually split my chakra to make real duplicates. The mage, who'd been listening intently, asked, could you teach these techniques to others? Naruto shook his head. Not without chakra networks, which I'm guessing people here don't have. It would be like trying to run water through pipes that don't exist. As they ascended through the floors, Naruto noticed something strange. The further they got from the 37th floor, the more he felt his connection to natural energy diminishing. Not completely, he could still access sage mode, but the effortless harmony he'd experienced on the floor of silence was fading. Is there something special about that 37th floor? He asked. The floor of silence? Gareth raised an eyebrow. It's known for absorbing sound and magic, making it difficult for mages to operate. Most adventurers hate it because communication becomes nearly impossible. Naruto pondered this. For me, it felt like home. Like the energy there resonated with my sage mode. Sage mode? It's a technique where I absorb natural energy and balance it with my physical and spiritual energies. Makes me stronger, faster, enhances my senses. The mage's eyes widened. You can absorb the dungeon's energy? Not exactly. I'm connecting with the natural energy that exists everywhere. But on that floor, it was concentrated in a way I've never felt before. The conversation paused as they reached the 18th floor, a massive safe zone known as Rivera. The forest-like environment surprised Naruto. A forest? Inside a dungeon? The 18th floor is an anomaly, explained Gareth. A safe zone where monsters don't spawn naturally. There's even a small town here. Rivera turned out to be a ramshackle settlement built by adventurers. As they entered, Naruto drew curious stares. His orange outfit stood out among the more practical adventure gear, and his whisker marks were certainly unusual. At a tavern, Gareth bought Naruto a drink. Consider it thanks for saving our lives. Without you, we'd be monster food by now. Naruto accepted the mug with a grin. Happy to help. So, what happens now? How do I get to this guild you mentioned? We'll reach the surface tomorrow. From there, we can take you to the guild headquarters. Gareth leaned forward, lowering his voice. But I should warn you, someone with your abilities will attract attention. A lot of it, and not all good. What do you mean? Gods and their familiars are always looking for powerful assets. Some will try to recruit you, others might see you as a threat. Gareth took a long sip of his drink. Especially if you continue operating without a blessing. Naruto considered this. Would joining one of these familiars be necessary? Without a Falna, you'll have no status, no official recognition of your abilities. The guild might not even register you as an adventurer. I don't really care about official recognition, Naruto said. I just need to figure out what happened and if I can get back home. Gareth studied him carefully. Home being a place called Konoha, in the land of fire. Probably in another dimension altogether, based on what happened on the 37th floor. Before Gareth could respond, the tavern door burst open. A group of rough-looking adventurers sauntered in, led by a tall man with a cruel smile. Well, look what the cat dragged in, he sneered, spotting Gareth. The washed-up dwarf and his pathetic expedition team. Heard you nearly got wiped out down below. Gareth tensed but kept his composure. Dex. Still picking fights to compensate for your inadequacies, I see. Dex's face darkened. He approached their table, followed by his lackeys. Who's your colorful new friend? Another weakling you're babysitting? Naruto didn't react to the provocation, instead taking a casual sip of his drink. His apparent disinterest seemed to infuriate Dex even more. I'm talking to you, Whisker Face. Naruto finally glanced up. Sorry, were you saying something important? I was thinking about ramen. A vein pulsed in Dex's forehead. You're in Rivera now, punk. Down here, strength is all that matters. Is that right? Naruto set down his mug slowly. Then maybe you should stop talking and show me this strength of yours. Dex reached for his sword, but before his hand even touched the hilt, Naruto had moved. No one saw him leave his seat, he simply appeared behind Dex, one hand resting lightly on the man's shoulder. On second thought, Naruto said cheerfully, fighting in here would wreck this nice tavern. So how about we don't? The tavern fell silent. Even Dex's companions stood frozen, unable to comprehend how the orange-clad stranger had moved so quickly. Dex himself was rigid with shock and growing fear. Naruto's hand on his shoulder felt impossibly heavy, as if the friendly gesture contained enough power to crush him into the floor. "Why don't you and your friends find another place to drink?" Naruto suggested, his voice still light but with an unmistakable edge. When he removed his hand, Dex stumbled forward, then quickly backed away. "This isn't over," he muttered, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. After they left, conversations slowly resumed throughout the tavern, though many glances were still directed Naruto's way. Gareth shook his head in amazement. "You just made an enemy, but also impressed everyone in this room. Word will spread about you now." Naruto shrugged. "Not my first bully, won't be my last. You moved faster than any level 5 I've seen. Without a blessing, that should be impossible." "Level 5? It's how we measure an adventurer's growth. Most start at level 1 and advance by accomplishing feats and overcoming challenges. Level 5s are among the elite, first-class adventurers." Naruto leaned back in his chair, thinking about the implications. "And what's the highest level?" "Currently, level 7, though it's exceedingly rare. Only a handful of adventurers have reached that height." "Interesting." Naruto didn't know how his abilities would translate to this world's power scale, but it seemed he was already operating well beyond the norm. That night, resting on a simple bed in Rivera's inn, Naruto tried to sort through everything he'd learned. This world, with its dungeon and gods and power system, was utterly foreign to him. Yet the natural energy on the 37th floor had felt more familiar than anything. He closed his eyes, extending his senses. Even here, many floors away, he could feel a faint connection to that place, the floor of silence. Something there resonated with his sage abilities in a way he couldn't explain. Whatever had brought him to this world, Naruto suspected the answers would be found in that silent, energy-rich environment. The following day, they continued their ascent toward the surface. Naruto grew increasingly curious about the world above as Gareth and his companions shared stories of Ryuu. The city built around the dungeon entrance, populated by adventurers and gods from various mythologies, sounded like nothing he'd ever experienced. "These gods?" Naruto asked as they climbed. "They actually walk around like normal people?" "More or less," said the female warrior, Tiona. She'd finally introduced herself. "They've descended from the divine realm and taken on physical forms with limitations. They can't use their arcanum, their divine powers, while in the lower world. So they're basically just really old people with attitude problems." Tiona burst out laughing. "Don't let any of them hear you say that, but, yeah, sometimes." When they finally emerged from the dungeon into the grand entrance hall known as Babel, Naruto couldn't help but gape at the architectural marvel. Enormous columns, intricate designs, and a ceiling that soared impossibly high above them. "Welcome to Babel Tower," Gareth said, watching Naruto's reaction with amusement. The structure built over the dungeon entrance. Adventurers streamed in and out, some heading downward for expeditions, others returning with bags full of magic stones and drop items. Guild employees managed the flow, checking registrations and collecting taxes on items brought up from the dungeon. "So this guild place runs everything?" Naruto asked as they walked. "They manage dungeon operations, register adventurers, exchange magic stones for currency, and generally keep things in order," Gareth explained. "They're neutral, not aligned with any god or familia." As they exited Babel into the streets of Ryuu, Naruto was struck by the bustling cityscape. The architecture reminded him somewhat of civilian towns in his world, but with unique elements, magical lighting, unusual building materials, and creatures that definitely weren't from any dimension he knew. "First, we should get you to the guild," Gareth said. "They'll want to interview you, especially since you're an adventurer without a fauna." "Will that be a problem?" "It'll be unprecedented. But after what I witnessed, they'd be fools to turn you away." Their path took them through Main Street, a wide avenue filled with shops, restaurants, and street vendors. People of various races, humans, elves, dwarves, animal people with ears and tails, went about their business. Some wore armor and carried weapons openly, marking them as adventurers. Naruto's orange outfit and whisker marks earned him curious glances, but in a city as diverse as Ororio, he wasn't particularly outlandish. "Before we go to the guild," Naruto said, suddenly stopping in his tracks. His nose had caught a familiar scent. "What's that amazing smell?" Gareth followed his gaze to a small food stall. "That? It's just a ramen shop." Naruto's face lit up like a child on his birthday. "They have ramen here? Real ramen?" Before Gareth could respond, Naruto was already heading for the stall at a pace that suggested he might use his teleportation technique if walking proved too slow. "I guess we're having lunch first," Tiona said with a chuckle. The ramen shop was simple but clean, with a counter where customers could watch the chef work his magic. Naruto took a seat, his excitement palpable. "One miso ramen with extra pork, please." The chef, a middle-aged human with muscular arms, nodded and began preparing the dish. Gareth and his companions joined Naruto at the counter, ordering more modest portions. "I take it you like ramen?" Gareth asked dryly. "Like it? Ramen is the food of the gods," Naruto declared. Then, remembering the context, he quickly added, "I mean, not your actual gods. Just a saying where I'm from." When the steaming bowl was placed before him, Naruto inhaled deeply, his eyes closed in reverence. Then he broke apart his chopsticks and dove in with gusto. The first taste made him pause. It wasn't Ichiraku's ramen, but it was surprisingly close: rich broth, tender noodles, perfectly cooked toppings. For a moment, homesickness washed over him. This familiar taste in such an unfamiliar world was both comforting and painful. "Everything okay?" Tiona asked, noticing his expression. Naruto nodded, pushing through the moment of nostalgia. "It's good. Really good." He finished his bowl in record time and immediately ordered another, much to the chef's delight. By the third bowl, even Gareth looked impressed. "Where do you put it all?" the dwarf wondered. Naruto patted his stomach. "High metabolism. Using chakra burns a lot of energy." As they finished their meal, Naruto noticed a commotion outside. A group of well-dressed adventurers walked by, led by a strikingly beautiful woman with silver hair. People on the street moved aside respectfully, some even bowing. "Who's that?" Naruto asked. Gareth glanced out and his expression tightened. Loki Familia members. Some of the top-ranked adventurers in Ororio. And the woman in front? Reverial Joe's Alf. A high elf and level 6 adventurer. Second in command of Loki Familia after Fin Dame. Naruto studied her, sensing the power she carried. Not raw chakra like in his world, but something different, refined, controlled strength that spoke of years of discipline. As if feeling his gaze, Reveria turned slightly, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment. She showed no reaction, but Naruto got the distinct impression she was assessing him with far more perception than a casual glance would suggest. Then the moment passed, and the Loki Familia members continued on their way. "We should head to the guild," Gareth said, finishing his drink. "It's not far from here." The guild headquarters was an impressive building with a grand entrance. Inside, adventurers lined up at counters where guild employees assisted them with various matters. Gareth approached a green-haired half-elf woman at one of the desks. "Aina, do you have a moment? We have a rather unusual situation." The woman looked up, adjusting her glasses. "Gareth. You're back early from your expedition. Is everything all right?" "Better than all right, thanks to him." Gareth gestured to Naruto. "This is Naruto Uzumaki. He saved our lives on the 37th floor." Aina's eyes widened. "The 37th? That's far beyond the limit for most adventurers." "He's not most adventurers," Gareth said. "In fact, he's not registered at all. No fauna." Now Aina looked truly shocked. "That's impossible. No one could survive the deep floors without a blessing." Naruto stepped forward with a friendly smile. Nice to meet you. And yeah, I don't have one of those blessing things. Where I'm from, we do things differently. And where exactly are you from, Mr. Uzumaki? That's complicated. Can we talk somewhere more private? Aina hesitated, then nodded. Follow me to the consultation room. The consultation room was small but comfortable, with a table and chairs. Once they were seated, Naruto gave Aina a condensed version of his story, his arrival on the 37th floor, the strange energy resonance, and his suspicion that he'd been transported from another dimension. To her credit, Aina listened without interruption, though her expression cycled through disbelief, shock, and cautious acceptance. That's quite a story, she said when he finished. Normally, I'd recommend a mental health evaluation, but given what Gareth has told me about your abilities, I can demonstrate if you want, Naruto offered. Perhaps later. For now, let's discuss the practical matters. You wish to be registered as an adventurer? Naruto shrugged. I need to figure out what happened and how to get home. If exploring the dungeon helps with that, then yeah, I guess I need to register. Without a fauna, I'm not sure if, he fought like a level 6, at least, Gareth interrupted. Took out monsters on the deep floors without breaking a sweat. The guild would be foolish to turn him away. Aina bit her lip, thinking. I'll need to consult with my superiors. This is unprecedented. While you do that, Naruto said, is there somewhere I could stay? And maybe get some local currency? I don't think my wallet works here. He pulled out a green frog-shaped coin purse to demonstrate. Despite the serious situation, Aina couldn't help but smile at the childish accessory. The guild can provide a small stipend for new adventurers, and there are inexpensive inns nearby. Or, Gareth interjected, you could consider joining a familia. Many provide housing for their members. Naruto frowned. I'm not really looking to serve some god I've never met. Not all familias work the same way, Aina explained. Some gods are more hands-off, allowing their children considerable freedom. I'll think about it, Naruto said, though he didn't sound convinced. Aina gathered her papers. For now, I'll arrange temporary accommodations while we sort out your registration. You mentioned the 37th floor held special significance for you. Yeah, the energy there resonated with my sage abilities. I'd like to go back and investigate further. That won't be possible without official registration, Aina said firmly. The guild restricts access to the deep floors for safety reasons. Naruto grinned mischievously. What if I promise to be really, really careful? The rules exist for everyone's protection, Mr. Uzumaki. Call me Naruto. And fine, I'll play by the rules, for now. After finalizing temporary arrangements, Naruto thanked Gareth and his party for their help. The dwarf handed him a small pouch of coins. A small token of our gratitude. Should be enough to get you started. Thanks. Naruto accepted the gift with genuine appreciation. Will I see you around? Likely. I'm with Loki Familia, though I mostly handle training these days. Gareth handed him a small wooden token. If you need anything, come to our manor and show them this. After they departed, Aina directed Naruto to a modest inn called the Benevolent Mistress. It's also a pub called the Hostess of Fertility. Popular with adventurers, reasonably priced, and the food is excellent. Sounds perfect, Naruto said. And by the way, I meant to ask, what's with the name Orario? Reminds me of a place called Sunagakure back home. Aina looked confused by the comparison. Orario has stood as the dungeon city for centuries. Its name comes from an ancient word meaning gateway or mouth. Fitting, I guess, with this giant dungeon thing you've got. As Naruto prepared to leave, Aina hesitated, then said, one word of advice, Naruto. Be careful who you trust with your abilities. Extraordinary power attracts extraordinary attention in this city. Naruto nodded, recognizing the genuine concern in her voice. Thanks for the warning. I've dealt with people after my power before. It usually doesn't end well for them. The hostess of fertility turned out to be a lively establishment. A large, cat-like woman greeted Naruto as he entered, her imposing figure and boisterous voice immediately drawing attention. Welcome, Naya. First time at the hostess? Yeah, I was told you have rooms available. Indeed we do. I'm Mia Grand, owner of this establishment. And you are? Naruto Uzumaki. Something flashed in Mia's eyes, recognition, perhaps. But of what? Unusual name. Where are you from, Naruto? Far away, he said, deciding that was simpler than the dimensional travel explanation. Mia studied him for a moment, then nodded. 5 valis a night for a room, includes breakfast. Dinner's extra but worth every coin. The price seemed reasonable based on what Gareth had given him. Sounds good to me. I'll take it. Excellent. Seer, show our new guest to his room. A gray-haired girl appeared from the kitchen, smiling warmly. Of course, Mamma Mia. Please follow me, Mr. Uzumaki. As she led him upstairs, Naruto noticed the girl studying him curiously. Is something wrong? He asked. Not at all, she said quickly. It's just, your clothes are unlike any I've seen. And those marks on your face. They're natural, Naruto said, touching his whisker marks. Had them since birth. They suit you, she said with another smile. Here's your room. It's simple but comfortable. The room was indeed basic, a bed, a small table with a chair, and a window overlooking the street. But it was clean and far more comfortable than many places Naruto had slept during missions. Thank you, he said. By the way, is there somewhere I could buy clothes? These might stand out a bit here. There are several shops on West Main. Babel Tower also has merchants selling adventure gear. She paused at the door. Dinner service starts in an hour if you're hungry. After she left, Naruto sat on the bed, taking a moment to process everything. In less than a day, he'd been transported to another world, fought monsters in a dungeon, met dwarves and elves, and learned about a society built around gods and adventurers. It was overwhelming, but not as disorienting as it might have been. His life had always been filled with the unexpected. He created a shadow clone. Keep an eye on things here, he told it. I'm going to check out the city. The clone nodded and sat cross-legged on the bed, entering a meditative state. Meanwhile, the real Naruto opened the window and leapt out, landing silently in the alley below. Rather than walking the streets, he took to the rooftops, moving with the practiced stealth of a shinobi. From above, Ororio revealed itself as a circular city with Babel Tower at its center. Massive walls surrounded it, presumably for protection. Various districts spread outward from the center, commercial areas, residential neighborhoods, and what appeared to be wealthier estates toward the north. Naruto stopped on a particularly tall building, closing his eyes to enter sage mode. With his enhanced senses, he could feel the pulse of the dungeon beneath the city, a vast reservoir of energy swirling below the surface. And deeper down, a familiar resonance called to him from the 37th floor. There was something else, too. A presence watching him, or at least, trying to. He opened his eyes and turned toward the sensation. High above the city, atop what appeared to be a luxurious tower, a figure stood at a window. Even at this distance, with his sage-enhanced vision, he could make out a woman with silver hair and extraordinary beauty. She was looking directly at him, despite the considerable distance between them. Their eyes met, and Naruto felt a strange pressure, as if she were trying to see not just his physical form, but something deeper. He released his sage mode and the connection broke. Curious, but not alarmed, Naruto continued his exploration of the city. By the time he returned to the hostess of fertility, dinner service was in full swing. The tavern portion of the establishment was packed with adventurers, merchants, and other Ororio residents enjoying food and drink. As soon as he entered, conversations paused. Many eyes turned toward him, the newcomer in bright orange. Naruto was used to attention, both positive and negative, and simply smiled as he made his way to an empty spot at the bar. Mia approached him with a grin. "Hungry, are we?" "Starving," Naruto admitted. "What's good here?" "Everything," she said without a hint of modesty. "But our meat stew is particularly popular with adventurers." "I'll have that, then. And whatever you've got that's closest to sake." As he waited for his food, Naruto observed the room. Most patrons had returned to their conversations, though occasional glances were still cast his way. The waitresses, all young women of various races, moved efficiently through the crowd, delivering food and collecting empty plates. One server in particular caught his attention, an elf with green hair and serious eyes. Unlike the others who smiled and chatted with customers, she maintained a professional distance, executing her duties with precision but minimal interaction. His food arrived, delivered by Seer. "Here you are. Enjoy the stew." Naruto thanked her and dug in. The stew was rich and hearty, filled with tender meat and vegetables in a savory broth. Not ramen, but definitely satisfying. He was halfway through his meal when the front door slammed open. A group of adventurers stumbled in, clearly intoxicated and rowdy. "Hey, cat lady," the leader shouted at Mia. "Drinks for me and my boys. We just hit level 2. Mia's expression darkened slightly, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "Take a seat and keep your voices down. My girls will serve you." The men laughed and pushed their way to a table, knocking into other patrons as they went. One of them bumped hard into the green-haired elf, causing her to drop her tray of drinks. "Watch it, knife ears," he sneered. The elf's expression didn't change, but Naruto noticed her hands clench slightly at her sides. "My apologies," she said, her voice controlled. "I'll bring fresh drinks." "Don't bother," the man said, grabbing her arm. "You can make it up to me another way." The tavern went quiet. Even the man's companions looked uncomfortable with the direction things were taking. Before Mia could intervene, Naruto was already moving. He appeared beside the man, his hand gently but firmly removing the adventurer's grip from the elf's arm. "I think you should apologize to the lady," Naruto said, his tone friendly but with an unmistakable edge. The man, momentarily startled by Naruto's sudden appearance, recovered his bravado. "Who the hell are you?" "This ain't your business, Whisker Face." "Naruto Uzumaki. And I'm making it my business." He smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "Now apologize, or I'll have to get creative." The man tried to throw a punch, but his fist passed through empty air as Naruto simply leaned aside. The momentum carried the drunk adventurer forward, stumbling into a table. "You're too slow," Naruto commented. "And your form is terrible." Enraged, the man charged. This time, Naruto didn't dodge. Instead, he caught the punch in his palm, absorbing the impact without moving an inch. "Last chance to apologize," Naruto said quietly. The adventurer tried to pull his fist back but couldn't break Naruto's grip. Panic flickered in his eyes as he realized he was completely outmatched. "Fine. Sorry. Now let go." Naruto released him, and the man stumbled backward into his companions. "We're leaving," he muttered, his face red with humiliation. After they departed, the normal tavern atmosphere gradually returned. Naruto turned to the elf, who was already cleaning up the spilled drinks. "You okay?" he asked. She glanced up, her expression unreadable. "I could have handled it myself." "Probably," Naruto agreed. "But that doesn't mean you should have to." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, at his response. "Thank you," she said simply, before returning to her work. Naruto went back to his meal, only to find Mia watching him with an amused expression. "That was well handled," she said. "Though I would have tossed him out myself in another minute." "I don't doubt it," Naruto grinned. "You remind me of someone from back home." She could be pretty scary when she wanted to be. The girl you helped is Ryuu Lion, Mia added, lowering her voice. She doesn't usually appreciate interference, but I think you impressed her. Is she an adventurer too? Mia corrected. Now she works here. Don't ask her about her past, it's a quick way to get on her bad side. Naruto nodded, his curiosity piqued but respecting the warning. He finished his meal as the tavern began to empty, night falling over Ororio. As he prepared to head upstairs, Seer approached him with a small package. For tomorrow, she explained. A lunch. It's tradition for new guests. That's really nice of you, Naruto said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Thank you. Upstairs, he found his shadow clone still meditating. Learn anything? He asked as he dispelled it. The clone's experiences flowed into him, hours of sensing the energies of Ororio, focusing particularly on the dungeon below. There was definitely something unique about the 37th floor, a resonance that called to his sage abilities. As he prepared for sleep, Naruto noticed a folded piece of paper that had been slipped under his door. Opening it, he found a simple message written in elegant script: the floor of silence calls to those who understand its nature. What are you, Naruto Uzumaki, that it speaks to you so clearly? Naruto stared at the note, intrigued rather than alarmed. Someone knew about his connection to the 37th floor, someone who signed with only a single initial. Tomorrow, he decided, he would begin investigating in earnest. Both the mysterious floor that resonated with his powers, and this, who seemed so interested in him. Dawn broke over Ororio, sunlight streaming through Naruto's window. He woke refreshed, his chakra fully restored after a night's rest. Creating a shadow clone, he sent it to gather information about the city while he headed downstairs for breakfast. The morning crowd at the Hostess of Fertility was smaller than the evening rush, mostly adventurers preparing for dungeon dives. Naruto spotted Ryuu wiping down tables, her movements efficient and precise. Morning, he greeted as he took a seat at the counter. She acknowledged him with a slight nod before returning to her work. Seer appeared with a bright smile. Good morning, Naruto. Did you sleep well? Like a log. What's for breakfast? Eggs, bacon, and fresh bread. And coffee, of course. As he ate, Naruto observed the other patrons. Most wore armor or carried weapons, marking them as adventurers. Their conversations revolved around dungeon strategies, monster encounters, and level-up requirements. Planning to dive today? Seer asked as she refilled his coffee. Maybe, Naruto said. I need to finish registering with the guild first. Oh. Which familia are you joining? None, actually. I'm trying to register as an independent. Seer's eyes widened. That's unusual. Most adventurers need a god's blessing to survive the dungeon. I'm not most adventurers, Naruto said with a grin. As he finished eating, Ryuu approached his table. You have unusual abilities, she stated without preamble. Naruto raised an eyebrow. That's direct. Your movement last night. It wasn't magic, but it wasn't normal physical ability either. Good eye, Naruto complimented her. Where I'm from, we call it chakra control. And where is that, exactly? Naruto considered how much to share. Something about Ryu's directness made him inclined to be honest. Another world, apparently. I was fighting a powerful enemy when something went wrong with a space-time technique. Next thing I knew, I was on the 37th floor of your dungeon. He expected disbelief, but Ryuu simply nodded. That explains the disturbance the guild reported yesterday. Disturbance? Unusual monster activity on the middle floors. Some claimed the dungeon itself was behaving erratically. Naruto frowned. You think my arrival caused that? It's a possibility. She paused, then added, if you intend to explore the dungeon, be cautious. Without a blessing, you'll face challenges beyond just monsters. Before Naruto could ask what she meant, the front door opened and a guild employee entered, scanning the room until she spotted him. "Mr. Uzumaki. Miss Toole sent me. The guild has made a decision regarding your registration." Naruto thanked her and stood. "Guess I'll find out if I'm officially an adventurer now." Ryuu watched him go, her expression unreadable. "The dungeon reveals truth," she said quietly. "Both about monsters and adventurers." At the guild headquarters, Aina waited with a senior official, a stern-looking older man with a meticulously trimmed beard. "Naruto, this is Royman Mardial, head of the guild in Orario," Aina introduced them. Royman studied Naruto with obvious skepticism. "Miss Toole has shared your unusual circumstances with me, Mr. Uzumaki. Normally, we would simply direct you to seek a god's blessing. However, I saved a veteran party on a floor where I supposedly shouldn't have been able to survive," Naruto finished for him. "Precisely. The guild cannot ignore such anomalies, particularly when they might affect dungeon stability. So what's the verdict?" Royman produced an official-looking document. "We are granting you provisional adventurer status. You may enter the dungeon and exchange magic stones, but with restrictions. You must report any unusual phenomena directly to Miss Toole, and you are prohibited from descending below the 18th floor without an approved escort." "The 18th floor?" Naruto frowned. "But I need to investigate the 37th. "That is non-negotiable," Royman said firmly. "Without a fauna, it would be irresponsible to authorize deeper exploration." Naruto was about to argue when Aina caught his eye, giving a subtle shake of her head. He decided to pick his battles. "Fine. I accept the terms." "Excellent." Royman handed him a small copper ID plate. "Your adventurer registration. Do not lose it." After the official left, Aina sighed. That went better than expected. He was initially against any registration at all. What changed his mind? Reports from Garrett's party, primarily. And she hesitated, "There may have been inquiries about you from certain influential parties." Naruto recalled the note from F and the silver-haired woman watching from the tower. "What kind of influential parties?" "I'm not at liberty to say," Aina said diplomatically. "But I advise caution. Orario's politics can be complicated." "Politics always are," Naruto replied, thinking of his own experiences with village councils and daimyos. "So what now? Can I dive into the dungeon today?" "Yes, but remember the restrictions. The 18th floor is your limit without an escort." Naruto nodded, though he had no intention of letting arbitrary rules prevent him from investigating the floor of silence. He'd just need to be more discreet. "One more thing," Aina added, lowering her voice. "Without a fauna, you won't have a status to track your abilities or growth. I recommend keeping detailed notes of your capabilities and any changes you notice." "That's actually good advice," Naruto said, thinking about how the 37th floor had amplified his sage abilities. "Thanks, Aina." She handed him a basic map of the upper dungeon floors. "This should help with navigation. The monsters get stronger as you descend, so even with your abilities, proceed with caution." Armed with his new adventurer status, Naruto headed for Babel Tower. The massive structure housed the main dungeon entrance, as well as shops catering to adventurers. He decided to browse for equipment before diving in. The merchants offered an impressive array of weapons, armor, and magical items. Most were beyond Naruto's current budget, but he invested in a sturdy backpack for carrying magic stones and other finds. As he shopped, he noticed a commotion near the dungeon entrance. A group of elegantly dressed adventurers was drawing attention, their equipment alone probably worth more than everything in the shop combined. At their center walked a woman of breathtaking beauty. Tall and graceful, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to change color in the light. Her presence commanded attention, adventurers and merchants alike stopping to watch her pass. What struck Naruto most wasn't her beauty, impressive as it was, but the aura she projected, power, confidence, and something else he couldn't quite identify. She moved like someone accustomed to being watched, yet seemed genuinely indifferent to the attention. As her group passed near him, her gaze swept the crowd and landed directly on Naruto. For a moment, they locked eyes, and Naruto felt that same strange pressure he'd experienced the night before, as if she were trying to see through him. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Not the practiced smile of a public figure, but something more genuine, curious, even pleased. One of her companions, a cat person with sharp features, followed her gaze and frowned when he saw Naruto. He leaned close to the woman, whispering something, but she dismissed him with a subtle gesture. The moment passed, and they continued toward the dungeon entrance. As they disappeared from view, the shop owner let out a breath. Lady Freya herself, he murmured. Rare to see her at the dungeon entrance. Freya? Naruto asked. As in, the goddess? The very same. Head of Freya Familia, one of the strongest in Ororio. The shopkeeper glanced at Naruto. You must be new not to recognize her. Just arrived yesterday, Naruto confirmed. So she's one of these gods that run Familias? Not just any goddess. Lady Freya is the goddess of beauty and love, among other things. The man lowered his voice. They say she can see directly into a person's soul. Naruto thought about that strange pressure he'd felt when their eyes met. Soul-seeing would explain it. Interesting. With his shopping complete, Naruto headed for the dungeon entrance. The massive doorway led to a broad staircase descending into the earth. Guild employees checked adventure passes as they entered. After verifying his provisional status, Naruto was allowed through. The air changed immediately, cooler, with a subtle scent of earth and something else, something alive. The dungeon itself. The first floor was relatively spacious, with wide corridors and high ceilings. Small, goblin-like creatures scurried about, generally avoiding adventurers unless cornered. Naruto observed other beginners fighting these monsters, struggling with what seemed to him like basic combat. He moved deeper, curious about how the dungeon operated. Unlike missions in his world, where terrain was natural and enemies had clear motivations, this place felt artificial, designed, almost. Monsters emerged from the walls themselves, materializing from what looked like crystalline growths. When defeated, they left behind magic stones, crystals containing the energy that had formed them. Naruto collected a few, noting how they resonated slightly with his own chakra. As he descended, the monsters became larger and more aggressive. By the fifth floor, he encountered bull-like creatures that charged with considerable force. Most adventurers at this level fought in parties, surrounding the monsters and attacking from multiple angles. Naruto, however, had no need for such tactics. His shadow clones made quick work of any threats, surrounding and overwhelming monsters before they could react. When a particularly large group appeared, he simply used a Rasengan to clear the way. Other adventurers stopped to watch, amazed by his efficiency. A few approached, asking which familia he belonged to. None, Naruto answered truthfully. I'm independent. This usually resulted in disbelief, followed by offers to introduce him to their respective gods. Naruto declined politely but firmly. By the time he reached the 10th floor, Naruto had gathered a substantial number of magic stones. The monsters here were tougher, large ape-like creatures that required actual effort to defeat. He engaged them directly, testing how his taijutsu worked against dungeon monsters. The results were satisfactory. His chakra-enhanced strikes could shatter monster armor, and his reflexes easily outpaced their attacks. It was almost too easy, reminding him of training sessions rather than actual combat. He continued downward, observing how the dungeon changed with each level. The terrain became more varied, with pools of water, elevated platforms, and natural choke points. Monster patterns became less predictable, with ambushes and pack tactics becoming common. On the 13th floor, Naruto encountered his first truly challenging opponent, a massive reptilian creature with armored scales and a club-like tail. Other adventurers called it a hellhound, though it looked nothing like any dog Naruto had seen. As it charged, Naruto entered his initial Jinchuriki mode, golden chakra flaring around him. The boost in speed and power let him sidestep the charge and deliver a devastating counterattack, his chakra-enhanced fist cracking the monster's armor. The hellhound roared in pain and swung its tail, faster than Naruto expected. The blow caught him in the side, sending him skidding back several meters. Not bad, Naruto grinned, actually enjoying the challenge. Let's see what you've got. He created 4 shadow clones, each attacking from a different angle. The hellhound fought ferociously, destroying 2 clones with powerful swings of its tail. But the distraction gave the real Naruto the opening he needed. Rasengan, he shouted, driving the spiraling sphere of chakra into the monster's exposed underbelly. The impact was devastating. The hellhound's armor shattered, and the creature dissolved into particles, leaving behind a large magic stone that glowed more brightly than the others Naruto had collected. A small group of adventurers who had been watching the battle approached cautiously. "That was amazing," said one, a young human with a basic sword. "What magic was that?" "Not magic, exactly," Naruto explained. "It's called chakra where I'm from." "And which familia teaches that technique?" asked another, clearly hoping to recruit Naruto to switch allegiances. "None here," Naruto said. "Like I said, I'm independent." Their questions were interrupted by a rumbling that shook the floor. Not a natural dungeon tremor, this felt deliberate, almost like something large was moving toward them. "That's not normal," one of the adventurers said, fear evident in his voice. "Monsters this big shouldn't be on the 13th floor." Before Naruto could respond, the wall exploded outward. Through the dust emerged a creature unlike the others he'd encountered, a towering humanoid with a bull's head, easily 3 times the size of the hellhound. "Minotaur," someone screamed. "Run!" The other adventurers fled, but Naruto stood his ground, studying the new threat. The Minotaur carried a crude axe formed from what looked like dungeon material. Its eyes glowed with malevolence as it spotted him. "You're not supposed to be here, are you?" Naruto murmured, sensing something off about the creature's presence. It felt directed, almost like it had been sent specifically to this location. The Minotaur charged with surprising speed for its size. Naruto dodged easily, using the movement to circle behind the creature. He launched a flurry of strikes at its back, testing its defenses. The monster was tough, far tougher than anything he'd faced so far. His normal attacks barely dented its hide. The Minotaur swung around with its axe, forcing Naruto to leap away. "Alright, let's kick it up a notch." Naruto formed his signature cross-shaped hand seal. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. 20 clones appeared, surrounding the Minotaur. They attacked in waves, forcing the monster to defend from all sides. While it was distracted, the real Naruto prepared a more powerful technique. Wind style, Rasen Shuriken. The advanced form of his signature technique formed in his hand, a Rasengan surrounded by a shuriken-like blade of wind chakra. He hurled it at the Minotaur just as his clones cleared the area. The impact was catastrophic. The Rasen Shuriken expanded on contact, engulfing the Minotaur in a sphere of destructive wind chakra that shredded it at the cellular level. When the technique dissipated, nothing remained of the monster except a particularly large, red-tinted magic stone. Naruto approached the stone cautiously. Unlike the others, this one pulsed with an energy that felt corrupted somehow. He picked it up, wrapping it in cloth before placing it in his pack. "That shouldn't have been here," he muttered to himself. "Someone's messing with the dungeon." As if in response to his words, the floor trembled again. This time, the very walls seemed to shift, passages realigning themselves. Naruto tensed, preparing for another attack, but instead, a new pathway opened, one that hadn't been there before. From within, he felt a familiar resonance, the same energy signature as the 37th floor, though fainter. The dungeon itself was responding to him. Cautious but intrigued, Naruto followed the new passage. It descended more steeply than the normal routes, bypassing what should have been several floors based on Ina's map. The air grew colder, the lighting dimmer, and the sounds of the dungeon faded to an eerie silence. After what seemed like hours of descent, the passage opened into a vast chamber unlike any other he'd seen. The ceiling soared hundreds of feet above, covered in luminescent crystals that bathed the area in soft blue light. The floor was smooth, almost polished, with intricate patterns that appeared to shift when viewed from different angles. And at the center stood a solitary figure, the silver-haired woman from Babel Tower. Freya. She turned as he entered, apparently unsurprised by his appearance. Naruto Uzumaki, she greeted, her voice melodious and warm. I've been waiting for you. Naruto approached cautiously, keeping a respectful distance. You're Freya. The goddess. She smiled, pleased that he recognized her. Indeed. And you are the sage who resonates with the floor of silence. How do you know about that? The note. That was you, wasn't it? Freya nodded, circling him with graceful steps. Her gaze was intense, studying him from every angle. Your soul is unlike any I've ever seen. Golden, vibrant, with depths of power that even you haven't fully explored. You can actually see souls? Naruto asked, fascinated despite his caution. It is my divine gift, she confirmed. Most souls are simple, predictable things. Yours. She paused, searching for words. Yours contains multitudes. Power, certainly, but also pain, resilience, and a light that refuses to be dimmed. Naruto wasn't sure how to respond to such an assessment. Why did you lead me here? What is this place? A Nexus chamber. They exist throughout the dungeon, places where its energies concentrate and can be accessed more directly. She gestured to their surroundings. This one is connected to the floor of silence, though we are nowhere near the 37th level. Connected how? The dungeon is more than a simple labyrinth, Naruto. It is a living entity with its own consciousness, its own will. Freya touched one of the wall crystals, which brightened at her touch. And it has taken an interest in you. Naruto thought about the path that had opened specifically for him, the way the floor had reacted to his presence. Why? That is what I hope to discover by meeting you here. She approached him directly now, stopping just a few feet away. May I? She reached toward him, her hand pausing just short of his chest. Understanding her intent, Naruto nodded cautiously. Freya placed her palm against his heart. The contact sent a surge of warmth through him, not unpleasant, but intense. Her eyes widened, their color shifting from silver to purple as she connected with his essence. Extraordinary, she breathed. You contain two distinct energy forms, no, three. Your own life force, a second entity bound within you, and a natural energy that permeates both. Naruto was shocked by her accuracy. You can sense Kurama. And Sage Mode? Is that what you call them? The nine-tailed fox spirit and your connection to natural energy? She withdrew her hand, looking thoughtful. That explains your resonance with the 37th floor. The floor of silence absorbs and channels natural energy in its purest form. Which is why my Sage Mode felt stronger there, Naruto realized. Precisely. Freya gestured to the magic stones in his pack. And that corrupted stone you collected, it bears the taint of someone attempting to manipulate the dungeon's flow of energy. Naruto withdrew the red-tinted stone. The minotaur that dropped this shouldn't have been on that floor. It was sent there. Yes, Freya confirmed. Someone is disturbing the natural order of the dungeon. They may have even facilitated your arrival, though perhaps not intentionally. Who? Freya's expression darkened. I have my suspicions. There are gods in Ororio with ambitions that extend beyond the entertainment of watching their children grow. Gods like you? Naruto asked directly. Rather than take offense, Freya laughed, a genuine, musical sound. I appreciate your directness, Naruto Uzumaki. Yes, I have my ambitions. I collect extraordinary souls, bringing them into my familia to watch them blossom. Is that what this is? A recruitment pitch? Would that interest you? She asked, studying his reaction. I could offer you resources, protection, information about the dungeon and the floor of silence. In exchange for your allegiance. Your extraordinary abilities under my familia's banner. She stepped closer again. I would mark you with my blessing, link my divine power to your already formidable abilities. The offer was tempting, especially the part about information on the floor of silence. But Naruto had never been one to rush into commitments. I appreciate the offer, he said carefully. But I just got here. I need time to understand this world, figure out if I can get home, and what I want to do if I can't. Rather than disappointment, Freya's expression showed respect. A wise response. Most mortals cannot resist when I offer my blessing directly. I'm not most mortals, Naruto said with a slight grin. No, she agreed. You certainly are not. She reached into her gown and withdrew a small silver pendant shaped like a feather. Take this. It will grant you access to my territory in Ryuu should you wish to speak with me again. Naruto accepted the token. Thank you. And the dungeon disturbances, what should I do about them? Continue exploring. Your presence seems to draw them out, which may help identify the source. She started to fade, becoming translucent. This is only a projection of myself, by the way. My physical form remains in Folkvang, my home in Ryuu. Convenient trick, Naruto commented, impressed despite himself. A minor application of divine power, she said with a smile. One last thing, Naruto Uzumaki. Be cautious of the elf at the tavern. Ryuu. Why? She bears scars deeper than she shows, and a past darker than you might guess. Freya's form continued to fade. But then, perhaps that's why your soul called to hers when you met. You understand what it means to wear a bright mask over pain. With those cryptic words, she vanished completely, leaving Naruto alone in the Nexus chamber. The crystals dimmed, and the pathway he'd followed began to close. Taking the hint, Naruto hurried back the way he'd come. By the time he reached the 13th floor again, the passage had vanished entirely, as if it had never existed. He stood for a moment, processing everything Freya had told him. The dungeon was alive. Someone was manipulating its energies. The 37th floor held special significance for his sage abilities. And apparently, he and Ryuu shared some kind of connection that even a goddess had noticed. With his pack full of magic stones and his mind full of questions, Naruto decided it was time to return to the surface. The guild would pay for the stones, providing him with funds to continue his investigation. As he ascended, he couldn't shake the feeling that his arrival in this world wasn't an accident. The way the dungeon responded to him, the connection to the floor of silence, Freya's immediate interest, it all suggested something more deliberate. Whether he had been pulled here for a purpose or simply landed in a world that resonated with his unique abilities remained to be seen. But one thing was certain, Ryuu and its mysterious dungeon had just become far more intriguing than he'd initially thought. And somewhere in that labyrinth, particularly on the 37th floor, lay answers he was determined to find. By the time Naruto reached the surface, evening had fallen over Ryuu. Babel Tower gleamed in the moonlight, its upper sections illuminated by magical lights. He headed straight for the guild to exchange his collected magic stones. The exchange counter was still open, staffed by a tired-looking human clerk. He raised an eyebrow at Naruto's bulging pack. First dive, he asked as Naruto emptied the stones onto the counter. Yeah, just getting a feel for the place. The clerk sorted through the collection with practiced efficiency, separating them by quality and size. Impressive haul for a beginner. You went deep. 13th floor, Naruto confirmed. The clerk paused at the red-tinted stone. Where did you get this? A minotaur on the 13th floor, Naruto said, watching the man's reaction carefully. As expected, the clerk looked shocked. Minotaurs don't appear above the 15th floor. And this stone? He examined it more closely. It's corrupted somehow. That's what I thought, Naruto said. I figured the guild would want to know about it. The clerk set the stone aside. I'll need to report this to my supervisor. The rest comes to 48,000 valis. He counted out coins from his drawer, placing them in a small pouch. Here you are. Thanks, Naruto said, pocketing the surprisingly heavy pouch. What about that stone? We'll need to study it. Irregular monster appearances are a guild concern. The clerk hesitated, then added, you should speak with Miss Toole about this tomorrow. Naruto nodded and left, making a mental note to visit Aina in the morning. With his new funds, he decided to invest in proper equipment before his next dive. But first, food, using chakra all day had left him ravenous. He headed back to the hostess of fertility, which was bustling with its usual evening crowd. Mia greeted him with a nod as he entered. Back from your first dive, are you? How'd it go? Interesting, Naruto said, taking a seat at the counter. The dungeon's not quite what I expected. It never is, Mia replied sagely. What'll you have? Whatever's hot and filling. And a lot of it. While waiting for his food, Naruto spotted Ryuu serving a table across the room. Her movements were as efficient as ever, but he noticed something new now that Freya had called his attention to it, a wariness in her posture, a subtle tension that never fully left her. She caught him watching and met his gaze directly. For a moment, something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of what Freya had suggested. Then she turned away, continuing her duties without comment. Seer delivered his meal, a hearty stew with thick slices of bread. How was your first day as an adventurer? She asked cheerfully. Educational, Naruto replied. The dungeon's a strange place. It can be dangerous for solo adventurers, she said, concern evident in her voice. Even experienced ones. I can handle myself, Naruto assured her. But thanks for worrying. As he ate, the tavern door opened to admit a familiar face, Gareth, the dwarf who had guided him to the surface. He spotted Naruto and made his way over. Thought I might find you here, Gareth said, taking the seat beside him. Word spreading about a blonde adventurer with unusual abilities who soloed down to the 13th floor on his first dive. Naruto grinned. News travels fast. In Ororio. Like lightning. Gareth ordered an ale from Mia. Also heard you encountered something unusual. A minotaur where it shouldn't be. News travels very fast, Naruto amended, eyeing the dwarf suspiciously. How'd you hear about that already? I have contacts in the guild, Gareth admitted. They know to keep me informed about dungeon irregularities. Because of your familia? Loki, right? Partly. We're one of the few familias with the strength to investigate deep floor anomalies. Gareth took a long pull from his ale. But mostly because dungeon irregularities are everyone's problem. When the natural order down there gets disrupted, bad things happen to all adventurers. Naruto considered whether to share what Freya had told him about someone manipulating the dungeon's energy. He decided a partial truth was safest until he knew more. I think someone's messing with the dungeon, he said quietly. That minotaur felt, directed. Like it was sent specifically to that location. Gareth's expression turned grave. That matches other reports we've received. Monsters appearing on incorrect floors, some with unusual colorations or abilities. Any idea who's behind it? There are rumors, Gareth said cautiously. Whispers about a god acting outside the rules established by the guild and Ganesha Familia. Which god? Gareth shook his head. Nothing concrete yet. Just suspicious activity among certain familias. He finished his ale and stood. Be careful, Naruto. Whatever's happening, it's escalating. And you, with your unique abilities, might become a target. Story of my life, Naruto said with a wry smile. Thanks for the warning. After Gareth departed, Naruto finished his meal deep in thought. Between Freya's warnings and now Gareth's, it was clear something significant was unfolding in Ryuu, something potentially connected to his own arrival. As he prepared to head upstairs, Ryuu approached his table. You went to the 13th floor today, she stated. News really does travel fast around here. The adventurers you assisted with the Hellhound were discussing it when they came in earlier. She studied him with those serious eyes. You encountered a Minotaur. Yeah, way out of place according to everyone. It's happening more frequently, she said. Monsters appearing where they shouldn't. The dungeon is restless. Naruto decided to test a theory. What do you know about the floor of silence? Something flickered in Ryu's expression, recognition, perhaps even concern. The 37th floor is dangerous, even for experienced adventurers. Its properties absorb sound and dampen magic, making coordination nearly impossible. Have you been there? Once, she admitted. It affected me differently than my companions. How so? Ryu hesitated, clearly uncomfortable sharing personal information. The silence didn't hinder me. It clarified things. That aligned with Naruto's experience, the floor hadn't dampened his abilities but enhanced them. Interesting. Why do you ask about that floor specifically? Her tone was casual, but Naruto sensed the intensity behind the question. That's where I first appeared in this world, he said honestly. And I think it's connected to what's happening with the dungeon. Ryu seemed to consider this information carefully. The guild won't allow you to reach that floor without an escort. Probably not, Naruto agreed. Unless I had help from someone familiar with the dungeon's middle floors. Their eyes met, a silent question hanging between them. I work here now, Ryu said finally. My adventuring days are behind me. Are they? Because you still move like someone who hasn't forgotten their training. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Observation skills, too. You're more than you appear, Naruto Uzumaki. I could say the same about you, Ryu Lion. She collected his empty plate. Get some rest. Adventuring is taxing, especially solo. As she walked away, Naruto had the distinct impression that their conversation wasn't over, merely paused until a more appropriate time. Upstairs in his room, Naruto created a shadow clone and sent it to meditate, focusing on the energy patterns he'd observed throughout the dungeon. Meanwhile, he sat on the windowsill, looking out over nighttime Ryuu. The city glowed with a mix of magical lights and traditional lanterns. From his vantage point, he could see adventurers returning from the dungeon, merchants closing shops, and patrons filing into taverns and inns. Despite its dangers and complexities, there was something appealing about this world. Still, he couldn't help but wonder about Konoha. Were his friends searching for him? Had time even passed there, or had he been transported not just across dimensions but through time as well? And what of the corrupted stone, the displaced Minotaur, and Freya's warnings about someone manipulating the dungeon? Tomorrow, he decided, he would visit the guild to speak with Aina, then make a more thorough exploration of the upper floors. If monster displacements were occurring throughout the dungeon, pattern recognition might help identify the source. As for the floor of silence, he would find a way there, with or without guild approval. The resonance with his sage abilities was too significant to ignore, especially if it held clues about his arrival and possible return home. With plans set, Naruto finally allowed himself to rest, dreaming of silent floors that pulsed with natural energy and silver-haired goddesses who could see into souls. Chapter 2, Bonds of Two Worlds. Word spread fast in Ryuu. By the time Naruto left the hostess of fertility the next morning, whispers followed him through the streets. Adventurers pointed and murmured about the blonde guy with the weird powers, and the independent who fought a Minotaur solo. Naruto wasn't unused to attention, good and bad, but the sheer speed of information flow in this city surprised even him. Seriously, he muttered after passing a group of novice adventurers who openly gaped as he walked by. Don't these people have monsters to fight or something? He made his way to the guild headquarters, finding it busier than the previous day. The queue at Ina's desk stretched across the lobby, but when she spotted him, she waved him over to a side entrance. I was hoping you'd come by, she said, leading him to a private consultation room. There's been significant interest in your report about the Minotaur. By significant, you mean? Several high-ranking familiars have requested information. She closed the door behind them. And the guild administration is concerned about increased monster irregularities. Naruto sat across from her. So I wasn't the first to report something weird? No. Ina adjusted her glasses. Over the past month, we've received multiple reports of monsters appearing on incorrect floors, some with unusual colorations or abilities. But your encounter was the most dramatic displacement yet. And the weird red stone it dropped? Our researchers are examining it. Ina leaned forward, lowering her voice. Naruto, this isn't common knowledge, but the guild believes someone is deliberately interfering with the dungeon's natural order. Someone like a god. Ina's eyes widened. How did you? She stopped herself. Yes, that's our suspicion. But we have no proof yet. Naruto decided to share part of what he'd learned. Yesterday, after finding the Minotaur, I noticed the dungeon, responding to me. A passage opened that shouldn't have been there. Ina tensed. You found a hidden path. Where did it lead? A large chamber with crystals. The place felt important, like a focal point for the dungeon's energy. A pantry, Ina whispered. You found a pantry without a map. What now? Pantries are rare rooms that act as collection points for the dungeon's energies. They're typically only found by experienced explorers with specialized map-making skills. She studied him intently. Did anything happen while you were there? Naruto considered mentioning Freya but decided against it for now. Just felt strange energy patterns. Like the room was scanning me or something. This is significant information. Ina made quick notes on her clipboard. The fact that the dungeon revealed such a room to you directly after an irregular monster encounter cannot be coincidence. That's what I thought. So what's the guild going to do about it? We're coordinating with several familiars to investigate. Ina sighed. Unfortunately, politics complicates matters. Many gods see this as an opportunity to increase their standing rather than a threat to be addressed cooperatively. Classic, Naruto muttered, thinking of similar issues with hidden villages back home. So where does that leave me? The guild would like you to continue exploring and report any further anomalies. She slid a small crystal across the table. This is a communication stone. If you encounter anything unusual, channel magic, or in your case, chakra, into it. It will alert our emergency response team. Naruto pocketed the crystal. Does this mean I'm authorized to go deeper now? Not officially, Ina said with a slight smile. But given the circumstances, the guild is looking the other way regarding certain restrictions for those helping investigate. Good enough for me. Naruto stood. I'll head back in today, see what else I can find. One more thing, Ina added. Be careful who you trust with information about the anomalies. If a god is behind this, they likely have followers throughout the city watching for those investigating. I'm pretty good at spotting people following me, Naruto assured her. Perks of ninja training. As he left the guild, Naruto sensed he was being watched. Not bothering with subtlety, he glanced directly at his observer, a hooded figure across the street who quickly disappeared into an alley. Instead of pursuing immediately, Naruto created a shadow clone in a nearby doorway, sending it after the watcher while he continued toward Babel Tower. The clone would alert him if it found anything significant. At Babel's merchant level, Naruto used his newly acquired funds to purchase proper adventure gear, light armor that wouldn't restrict his movement, utility pouches similar to those he'd used as a shinobi, and a basic weapon as cover. Though he rarely needed tools beyond his own techniques, blending in had advantages. First real dive, asked the blacksmith as he fitted Naruto's armor. Second, but first with proper equipment, Naruto replied. The dwarf nodded approvingly. Smart. Too many rookies rush in unprepared. He handed Naruto a small knife with unusual markings. Throw this in if you're buying the whole set. Mithril edge, cuts monster hide better than standard steel. Naruto examined the blade, noting its perfect balance. Thanks. What do I owe you? 22,000 valis for everything. The blacksmith eyed him curiously. Word is you're operating independent. No familia. That a problem? Not to me. Just rare to see someone making it work. The dwarf collected his payment. Name's Tsubaki, by the way. I do custom work if you need something specific later. I'll keep that in mind. Equipped with his new gear and provisions, Naruto headed for the dungeon entrance. The clerk checking passes recognized him from the previous day. Back already? The man stamped his pass. Most take a day to recover after reaching the lower floors. I heal quick, Naruto said with a grin. Inside the dungeon, he moved more purposefully than the day before, less focused on exploration and more on detecting irregularities. Rather than descending directly, he spent time on each floor, extending his senses in sage mode to feel for energy disruptions. By the 9th floor, he'd found nothing unusual beyond normal dungeon activity. Frustrated, he decided to push deeper, moving quickly through levels he'd already explored. On the 14th floor, he encountered his first anomaly, a corridor where the ambient temperature was significantly lower than surrounding areas. Frost covered the walls, and his breath fogged in the air. Definitely not normal, he muttered, activating sage mode to investigate. The cold emanated from a crack in the floor, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. Natural energy flowed through the opening in an unnatural pattern, as if being siphoned. Naruto knelt, examining the crack without touching it. The energy movement reminded him of chakra absorption techniques. Someone or something was drawing power from this specific location. He channeled a small amount of chakra into the guild's communication crystal, marking the location for investigation. Then, curiosity overwhelming caution, he sent a shadow clone transformation jutsu disguised as a small mouse through the crack. The clone's experiences returned to him minutes later when it dispelled, a network of tiny fissures beneath the official dungeon structure, all pulsing with the same siphoned energy. Something was creating a secondary system within the dungeon itself. Clever, Naruto acknowledged. Hard to detect unless you're specifically looking for it. He continued his exploration, finding 2 more such anomalies on the 16th and 17th floors. Each connected to the same hidden network, though the energy patterns varied slightly between locations. By the time he reached the 18th floor, Rivera, he had a mental map of energy extraction points throughout the upper dungeon. The pattern suggested a deliberate effort to avoid detection, with no 2 points on adjacent floors. In Rivera, adventurers were gathered in greater numbers than his previous visit. Many looked battle-worn, discussing monster encounters that sounded far more dangerous than usual for these floors. Totally different coloration, and twice as aggressive, swear it was using strategy, herding us toward the acid pools. 3 parties wiped out just trying to reach Rivera. Naruto found a quiet corner in the same tavern he'd visited with Gareth's party, ordering food while he eavesdropped on the conversations. The pattern was clear, abnormal monster behavior throughout the dungeon, increasing in frequency and severity. As he ate, a shadow fell across his table. Looking up, he found himself face to face with a regal-looking elf with green hair tied back in a long ponytail. He recognized her immediately from the street, Riveria of Loki Familia. "May I join you?" she asked, her tone making it clear this was more command than request. Naruto gestured to the empty chair. "Free country. Or dungeon. Whatever." She sat gracefully, studying him with piercing eyes. "You've caused quite a stir in Ororio, Naruto Uzumaki." Word really does travel fast around here, he commented, continuing his meal. What can I do for Loki Familia's second-in-command? If she was surprised he knew her position, she didn't show it. Information, primarily. Gareth speaks highly of your abilities, and your observations regarding dungeon anomalies align with our own investigations. So this is an official visit? Your goddess sent you. Loki is, aware of my interest, Riveria said carefully. Though this conversation is more pragmatic than political. Naruto set down his fork. Alright, I'm listening. Loki Familia has been tracking the dungeon irregularities for several months. The pattern suggests coordinated interference rather than natural evolution. She lowered her voice. Yesterday, you encountered both a displaced minotaur and a hidden pantry. Both significant anomalies. And you want to know what I saw? I want to know what you sensed. Riveria's gaze intensified. Gareth claims your abilities differ from standard adventurer skills. You perceive energy patterns others cannot. Naruto weighed his options. Loki Familia was powerful and well-connected, potentially valuable allies, but also an unknown quantity in terms of trustworthiness. I found energy being siphoned through cracks in the dungeon structure, he said finally. A hidden network beneath the official floors. Someone's extracting power from specific points, probably trying to avoid detection by spreading them across multiple levels. Riveria didn't seem surprised, merely nodding. That confirms our suspicions. Our captain, Finn, theorized something similar based on monster behavior patterns. Any idea who's behind it? Several possibilities, but no conclusive evidence. She withdrew a small map from her cloak, unfolding it on the table. These are the anomaly points we've identified so far. Would you mark the locations you discovered today? Naruto studied the map, an impressively detailed rendering of the upper and middle dungeon floors. Loki Familia had already identified 7 energy extraction points. He marked the 3 additional locations he'd found. Riveria examined the updated map, her expression thoughtful. The pattern becomes clearer. They're creating a circuit of sorts, an energy collection system with Rivera at its center. Why Rivera? It's just a safe zone, right? On the surface, yes. But it's also the largest naturally occurring deviation in the dungeon structure, a floor that defies the dungeon's usual monster spawning pattern. Riveria traced the marked points with her finger. If one wanted to introduce a large-scale change to the dungeon's fundamental nature, Rivera would be the weak point, Naruto finished, seeing the logic. Like injecting something into a vein where the wall is already thin. Precisely. She folded the map, returning it to her cloak. Loki Familia is organizing an expedition to investigate deeper floor anomalies. Your insight would be valuable. Is this a recruitment pitch? Riveria's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. Merely a mutually beneficial cooperation proposal. You seek answers about your arrival and the floor of silence. We seek to understand the threats to the dungeon's stability. And your goddess is okay working with an independent adventurer. Loki appreciates useful assets, regardless of affiliation. Riveria stood. Consider the offer. We depart in 3 days. As she turned to leave, Naruto called after her. One question, have you ever been to the floor of silence? Riveria paused. Once. It was disorienting. Even for an elf accustomed to natural magic. How so? The floor consumed my magic rather than allowing me to channel it. A shadow crossed her features. It felt as though it was learning from me, adapting to my abilities. Few places in the dungeon display such intelligence. With that disturbing observation, she departed, leaving Naruto with much to consider. Loki Familia's expedition could provide legitimate access to the deeper floors, including potentially the 37th. But aligning with any faction carried its own risks. He finished his meal and continued his exploration, descending past Rivera to the 19th floor. Here, the dungeon's nature changed dramatically, more organic structures, different lighting, and increasingly dangerous monsters. The 19th floor brought his first significant challenge of the day, a pack of needle-like creatures Ina's bestiary had called venomizers. Fast, coordinated, and capable of shooting poisonous spines, they surrounded Naruto in a narrow corridor. Well, this should be fun, he grinned, dropping into a fighting stance. The monsters attacked in waves, alternating direct assaults with spine barrages. Naruto dodged with ease, his reflexes far outpacing their movements, but their coordination impressed him. These weren't acting on simple instinct, they demonstrated tactical awareness. He formed his signature cross-shaped hand seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A dozen clones appeared, engaging the venomizers from multiple angles. The monsters adapted quickly, focusing fire on the duplicates while the alpha of the pack circled toward what it perceived as the real Naruto. It was, of course, another clone. The real Naruto watched from above, clinging to the ceiling with chakra. When the alpha committed to its attack, he dropped down behind it. Rasengan. The spiraling sphere of chakra tore through the alpha, its body dissolving into particles around the crystalline magic stone. Without their leader, the remaining venomizers fell into disarray, easily dispatched by Naruto's clones. As he collected the magic stones, Naruto noticed something odd about the alpha's crystal, faint red veins running through it, similar to the corrupted stone from the Minotaur. Another piece of the puzzle, he murmured, wrapping it carefully before storing it. He continued through the 19th and 20th floors, encountering more monster parties that displayed unusual coordination. None yielded corrupted stones, but the pattern was consistent, monster behavior becoming more intelligent, more tactical. On the 21st floor, Naruto encountered his first adventurer party in serious trouble. 3 mid-level adventurers were cornered by a monster he hadn't seen before, a massive, crystal-covered ape with multiple limbs sprouting from its back. The adventurers were bleeding from numerous wounds, clearly outmatched. Without hesitation, Naruto leapt into the fray. "Get clear," he shouted to the party. "I'll handle this." The monster turned its attention to him, crystal growths on its body glowing with ominous energy. It roared, the sound painfully loud in the confined space, and charged. Naruto met it head-on, testing its defenses with a series of taijutsu strikes. The crystal armor proved remarkably resilient, deflecting blows that would have shattered normal monster hide. "You're a tough one, huh?" Naruto grinned, jumping back to reassess. The crystals seemed to absorb impact energy rather than breaking, an unusual property for dungeon monsters. The ape slammed its extra limbs into the ground, sending shockwaves through the floor. Cracks spread outward, forcing Naruto to leap to avoid falling into newly formed pits. Okay, no more playing around. He entered initial Jinchuriki mode, golden chakra flaring around him. The sudden power spike made the injured adventurers gasp in shock. With enhanced speed and strength, Naruto flanked the crystal ape, aiming for joints where the armor appeared thinner. His chakra-enhanced strikes began cracking the crystal plating, causing the monster to howl in pain. It retaliated with a barrage of crystal shards launched from its back. Naruto deflected most with a kunai but felt several slice across his arm and leg, surprisingly sharp and infused with some energy that burned on contact. "That stings," he muttered, examining a shallow cut that glowed faintly red. "Some kind of poison." The monster wasn't waiting for him to analyze its abilities. It charged again, multiple limbs striking from different angles. Naruto dodged and countered, gradually wearing down its defenses. Finally, seeing an opening in its cracked chest armor, he formed his most powerful basic technique. Massive Rasengan. The enlarged sphere of spiraling chakra slammed into the crystal ape's core, shattering its remaining armor and boring through its body. The monster dissolved, leaving behind an unusually large magic stone pulsing with red and blue energy. Naruto approached it cautiously, using Sage Mode to analyze its properties. The stone contained multiple energy signatures, the dungeon's natural power, the corrupted red energy he'd seen before, and something new, something that resonated with his own chakra. What the hell? He wrapped the stone carefully, then turned his attention to the injured adventurers. "You guys okay?" he asked, kneeling beside the most severely wounded, a young human swordsman with a deep gash across his torso. What was that monster?" the swordsman gasped. "And what are you?" "That golden energy." "Long story," Naruto replied, examining the wound. "This needs treatment. Anyone have healing items?" The party's supporter, a timid-looking animal person with rabbit ears, produced a potion. "This is all we have left." Naruto took the potion but hesitated. Back home, he could have asked Kurama to share healing chakra with others. He wasn't sure if that would work the same way here. "Worth a try," he muttered. "Hey, Kurama, you awake in there?" The fox's presence stirred within him. "What now, Naruto? More trouble already? Got some injured adventurers. Think we can help them out?" A rumbling sigh echoed through his mindscape. "Your bleeding heart never changes, regardless of dimension." "Fine, but I'm not sure how our chakra will interact with these people." "Only one way to find out." Naruto focused, drawing on Kurama's healing chakra and channeling it into his palms. The energy manifested as a soft golden glow, gentler than his battle aura but clearly visible to the shocked adventurers. "This might feel weird," he warned, placing his hands over the swordsman's wound. "But it should help." The healing chakra flowed into the injury, accelerating the body's natural processes. The wound began closing visibly, healthy tissue forming to replace damaged cells. The swordsman's eyes widened in astonishment. "It doesn't even hurt anymore," he whispered. "What kind of magic is this?" "Not magic exactly," Naruto replied, moving to treat the others. "Where I come from, we call it chakra." As he healed each adventurer, they stared at him with a mixture of gratitude and awe. By the time he finished, all three were back on their feet, their wounds reduced to faint scars or completely healed. "We owe you our lives," said the party leader, a female half-elf with a staff. "That monster appeared out of nowhere, much stronger than anything documented on this floor." "Been happening a lot lately," Naruto confirmed. "The dungeon's acting weird. You should head back to the surface, report what you encountered." "What about you?" asked the supporter. "Aren't you going back too?" Naruto shook his head. "Still got exploring to do. Just be careful on your way up. Might be more surprises." After ensuring the party could travel safely, Naruto continued deeper. The encounter with the crystal ape troubled him, not just its unusual abilities, but the strange resonance in its magic stone. Something about that energy signature felt familiar, almost like a diluted version of his own chakra. He reached the 24th floor by evening, finding another safe zone where adventurers had established a small encampment. Unlike Rivera, this outpost was rudimentary, just enough shelter for parties resting before deeper dives or returning from below. The atmosphere was tense, adventurers gathered in small groups discussing encounters similar to what Naruto had experienced. Unusual monsters, altered floor layouts, strange energy manifestations, the anomalies were increasing the deeper one went. As Naruto set up his own small camp in a secluded corner, he sensed a familiar presence approaching. Without looking up, he said, "Didn't expect to see you down here, Ryuu." The elf stepped into view, no longer wearing her waitress uniform. Instead, she was dressed in lightweight adventure gear, a hood partially concealing her face. "You've improved at detection since yesterday," she observed, sitting across from him. "Or maybe you weren't trying to hide." Naruto smiled. "Taking a break from serving drinks? I have the evening off." She glanced around the encampment. Word reached the surface about increased anomalies. "I decided to investigate." "Just like that? Thought your adventuring days were behind you." Something flickered in her eyes, determination mixed with caution. "Some concerns transcend personal choices." Naruto studied her, noting the confidence in her posture, the way she constantly assessed their surroundings, traits of a highly skilled adventurer, not a simple waitress. You're worried about these dungeon changes, he stated rather than asked. Yes. She lowered her voice. The last time the dungeon showed similar patterns, many died. If history is repeating itself. You want to stop it before that happens, Naruto finished. Noble of you. Practical, she corrected. I live in Ryuu. If the dungeon destabilizes, everyone suffers. Naruto offered her some of his provisions, which she accepted with a nod of thanks. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. I found something interesting today, he said, withdrawing the crystal ape's magic stone. Ever seen anything like this? Ryuu examined the stone without touching it, her expression growing concerned. The coloration is abnormal. And the energy pattern. She looked up sharply. Where did you find this? 21st floor. Nasty crystal-covered ape thing. Stronger than it should have been. A Spartoy, Ryuu identified. But they don't typically appear above the 30th floor, and never with such coloration. She pointed to the blue patterns within the stone. This energy signature is particularly concerning. Why's that? It resembles adventurer magic more than dungeon energy. She sat back, frowning. As if the monster had somehow absorbed magical abilities from adventurers. That aligned with what Naruto had sensed, the strange resonance with his own chakra. You think monsters are adapting to adventurers' abilities? It's not unprecedented, Ryuu said carefully. The dungeon learns. Evolves in response to threats. But this acceleration is unnatural. Someone's helping it along, Naruto suggested. Using those energy extraction points I found to feed new information into the dungeon system. Ryu's eyes widened slightly. You found extraction points? Where? Naruto described the locations and energy patterns he'd discovered. Ryuu listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed considerable knowledge of dungeon mechanics. This confirms what I suspected, she said when he finished. Someone is creating a network beneath the official dungeon structure, a secondary system to influence monster development. Any idea who? There are rumors of a god operating outside the guild's authority. A deity obsessed with death and transformation. Ryu's expression darkened. Thanatos. God of death. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Bit on the nose, isn't it? Gods often embody their domains quite literally, Ryuu said dryly. Thanatos has always been fascinated by the dungeon's capacity to transform energy into life, albeit monstrous life. So you think he's behind these anomalies? Creating some kind of supermonsters? Perhaps. Or perhaps something worse. Ryu's voice dropped further. There are ancient texts describing rituals to elevate a god's power beyond their normal constraints in the mortal world. Most require massive energy collections. The implications were disturbing. If a god was harvesting dungeon energy for such a ritual, the consequences could be catastrophic. I need to reach the floor of silence, Naruto said decisively. The energy patterns there might help me understand what's happening. Ryuu studied him for a long moment. You truly believe your connection to that floor is significant? I know it is. The natural energy there resonates with my sage abilities in a way nothing else in this world does. He met her gaze directly. And I think you felt something similar when you visited it. She didn't deny it. The silence spoke to me, she admitted quietly. In ways my companions couldn't understand. I'm heading there tomorrow, Naruto declared. With or without guild approval. That would be reckless, Ryuu said, though without much conviction. The middle floors are dangerous even for experienced parties. I'll manage. Naruto grinned. Unless, of course, someone familiar with those floors decided to tag along. Their eyes met, a silent challenge passing between them. I have obligations at the hostess, Ryuu said after a moment. Mia seems understanding. Bet she'd give you a few days off for something this important. Ryuu almost smiled. You don't give up easily, do you? Not in my nature, Naruto confirmed cheerfully. So, what do you say? Partners for a special expedition? She considered the proposal, weighing options and consequences. Finally, she nodded. Under one condition, we maintain a low profile. If certain factions learn of our investigation. Stealth is literally my specialty, Naruto assured her. I was trained as a ninja since childhood. Then we leave at dawn, Ryuu decided. The path to the 37th floor requires careful navigation. We'll need to avoid both monsters and other adventurers. They spent the next hour planning their route, with Ryuu sharing her knowledge of the middle floors and Naruto describing his sensory abilities. Despite having just met, they fell into an easy collaboration, each recognizing the other's competence. As other adventurers settled in for the night, Ryuu prepared to return to the surface. I'll gather supplies and meet you at the eastern exit of this floor at first light. I'll be there. Naruto hesitated, then added, thanks for this, Ryuu. I know returning to adventuring can't be easy after whatever made you stop. Something vulnerable flashed across her features before her composure returned. Some paths cannot be abandoned, merely paused. She pulled her hood lower. Rest well, Naruto. Tomorrow will test us both. After she departed, Naruto created shadow clones to maintain watch while he meditated. He needed to communicate with Kurama about their findings and prepare for what promised to be a challenging expedition. Within his mindscape, he found the nine-tailed fox lounging in the familiar space they shared. Quite the mess you've landed us in this time, Kurama commented, opening one massive eye. Gods, dungeons, and corrupted monsters. Just another Tuesday for us, right? Naruto grinned, sitting cross-legged before the fox. What do you make of that stone we found today? The energy felt weird. Because it contained traces of our chakra, Kurama confirmed. Or rather, a replication attempt. Something or someone is sampling energy signatures and feeding them into these enhanced monsters. Like they're creating monsters specifically designed to counter certain adventurers. Precisely. Kurama's tail swished thoughtfully. An efficient way to eliminate threats, create predators perfectly adapted to their prey's weaknesses. That's disturbing. Naruto frowned. And that elf, Ryuu. She knows more than she's saying. Of course she does, Kurama snorted. She carries the scent of old blood and unresolved vengeance. But her intentions toward you seem genuine enough. I trust her, Naruto decided. At least for this expedition. Your instincts about people rarely lead you astray, Kurama acknowledged. Though your trust in that goddess remains questionable. Freya. She's been straightforward so far. She's a deity of manipulation, Naruto. Her domain literally includes seduction and desire. The fox's expression turned serious. Just remember that gods in this world play long games with mortal lives. Their perspective spans millennia, not decades. I'll be careful, Naruto promised. For now, we need to focus on reaching the floor of silence. Something that connects to how we arrived in this world. And potentially how we might return, Kurama added. Though I wonder if that's still your primary motivation. Naruto didn't answer immediately. In truth, his desire to return home had become complicated by his experiences in Ororio, the mysteries to solve, the people he'd met, the sense that his arrival might not have been accidental. One step at a time, he said finally. First we understand what's happening with the dungeon. Then we can decide our next move. Kurama rumbled in agreement. Rest then. I'll maintain awareness while your body sleeps. With that assurance, Naruto returned to physical consciousness long enough to dismiss his shadow clones and settle into his bedroll. Despite the strange environment and looming challenges, he fell asleep quickly, his dreams filled with silent floors and watchful gods. Dawn broke on the 24th floor, not with sunlight, but with the dungeon's crystal formations brightening to simulate morning. Naruto was already awake, checking his equipment and sealing a spare set in a storage scroll he'd kept from home. Ryuu arrived precisely on time, carrying a small pack and equipped with light armor beneath a hooded cloak. At her hip hung a slender sword, and various pouches suggested an arsenal of smaller weapons and tools. "Ready?" she asked simply. Naruto nodded. "Lead the way." They departed eastward, taking a less traveled path that Ryuu claimed would avoid the main adventure routes. She moved with impressive speed and stealth, confirming Naruto's suspicions about her abilities. "So," he said as they navigated a narrow passage, "what level are you anyway?" "As an adventurer." "That information isn't relevant to our expedition," she replied without slowing. "Just curious. You move like someone with serious training." Ryuu glanced back at him. "I could say the same about you. Your abilities exceed what should be possible without a fauna." "Fair point," Naruto conceded. "Guess we both have our secrets." They fell into silence as they descended through the 25th and 26th floors. The monster population increased, but between Naruto's sensory abilities and Ryuu's knowledge of patrol patterns, they avoided most encounters. When combat proved unavoidable, Naruto witnessed firsthand why Ryuu had earned her reputation. She fought with extraordinary precision, no wasted movement, each strike calculated for maximum effect. Her speed nearly matched his own, and her awareness of battlefield dynamics spoke of extensive experience. After dispatching a particularly aggressive monster pack, Naruto couldn't contain his admiration. "Okay, you're definitely not just a waitress." Ryuu cleaned her blade methodically. "I serve drinks at the Hostess of Fertility. That is my current occupation." "And before that?" Her expression closed off. "Before is before." Naruto respected her privacy, changing the subject. "Any more of those anomalies you mentioned on these floors?" "Several," Ryuu confirmed, seemingly grateful for the shift in conversation. The 27th floor had reports of acid pools expanding beyond their normal boundaries. And the monsters on the 30th have been displaying pack tactics previously only seen much deeper. Systematic changes, Naruto mused. Like the dungeons being reprogrammed. They reached the 27th floor by mid-morning, encountering the acid pools Ryuu had mentioned. What should have been contained basins had expanded into flowing streams that cut across normal paths, forcing detours through more dangerous areas. "This is recent," Ryuu noted, examining a corroded section of wall. "The structural changes are accelerating. Can the dungeon really reshape itself this dramatically?" "Not naturally," Ryuu said grimly. "Even the dungeon's evolution follows patterns, predictable responses to adventurer activities. This is directed change." They pressed onward, their progress slowed by necessary detours and increasingly frequent monster encounters. Many of the creatures showed the same unusual coordination Naruto had observed earlier, some even setting ambushes that suggested tactical awareness. By afternoon, they reached the 30th floor, a major threshold in dungeon exploration. The environment changed dramatically here, the relatively ordered structures of upper floors giving way to more organic, almost flesh-like architecture. The walls pulsed subtly, and the ambient temperature rose significantly. "Charming decor," Naruto commented, eyeing the unsettling surroundings. "The dungeon becomes more alive the deeper you go," Ryuu explained. Past the 30th floor, it's commonly believed we're traveling through something akin to the dungeon's body rather than mere caves. That's disturbing. Many theories suggest the entire structure is a single massive organism, she continued, navigating a pulsating corridor. The guild discourages such speculation, preferring to view it as a natural phenomenon, but those who've reached the deepest known floors report experiences that suggest consciousness. As they moved through the 30th floor, Naruto extended his sage senses, trying to get a better read on the environment. The natural energy here flowed differently, more purposeful, almost circular, as if following a predetermined path. "There's a pattern to the energy movement," he told Ryuu. "Like blood circulation in a body." She nodded, unsurprised. The 33rd floor contains what some explorers call the heart, a massive chamber where energy visibly pulses through crystal veins. And we're heading right for it? Unfortunately, yes. It's the most direct route to the floor of silence. As they approached a junction, Ryuu suddenly froze, holding up a hand for silence. Naruto immediately sensed what had alarmed her: multiple presences ahead, not monsters but adventurers. A large party, based on the energy signatures. Another expedition, Ryuu whispered. We should avoid them. Naruto agreed, but as they prepared to detour, his enhanced hearing caught fragments of conversation from the distant party. Preparations complete on the 33rd, Lord Thanatos expects results by tomorrow's ritual, specimens responding well to the altered formula. He caught Ryuu's eye, seeing she'd heard it too. Thanatos, he mouthed silently. She nodded, her expression grim. They carefully backtracked, finding an alternate route that circled wide around the other party. Once safely past, Ryuu spoke in a hushed voice. They confirmed our suspicions. Thanatos is behind the anomalies. And apparently conducting some kind of ritual tomorrow, Naruto added. On the 33rd floor, the heart you mentioned. This is worse than I feared. Ryuu's pace quickened. If he's manipulating the dungeon's core energy distribution point, he could potentially affect the entire structure, Naruto finished. We need to warn the guild. The communication crystal won't work at this depth. We'd need to return to at least the 20th floor. Naruto considered their options. Or we continue to the floor of silence, gather definitive evidence, then report everything at once. Ryuu hesitated, weighing the risks. If we're discovered by Thanatos' followers, we can handle ourselves, Naruto assured her. And I need to understand what's happening on the 37th floor. It might be connected to how I can stop whatever ritual he's planning. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. Very well. But we proceed with maximum caution. No unnecessary combat, no detection if possible. They continued through the 30th and 31st floors, moving with increased urgency. The monster population thinned somewhat, which Ryuu found concerning. They're being drawn elsewhere, she explained. Probably toward whatever preparations Thanatos is making. The 32nd floor brought their first significant challenge, a massive chasm cutting across their path, too wide to jump conventionally. The bottom was lost in darkness, the sound of flowing liquid suggesting an underground river. Normally there's a land bridge here, Ryuu said, surveying the gap with concern. Another structural change. How do we get across? Ryuu removed a coil of lightweight rope from her pack. There are anchor points for temporary bridges. If I can secure this line, hold that thought, Naruto interrupted, forming a hand seal. I've got a better idea. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 20 clones appeared, immediately organizing themselves into a human chain that spanned the chasm. The first clone secured himself to the edge while the others linked arms, creating a living bridge. After you, Naruto gestured with a grin. Ryuu stared at the clone bridge with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. They'll hold. They're solid duplicates, not illusions. Each has the same strength I do. Still looking dubious, Ryuu cautiously stepped onto the first clone's back. When it remained stable, she proceeded across the human chain, her footsteps light and quick. Once she reached the other side, Naruto followed, then dismissed the clones after crossing. Handy trick, right? Extremely, Ryuu acknowledged. Your abilities are unique. Just wait till you see my greatest technique, Talk no Jutsu, Naruto joked. It's converted more enemies than any combat move. A hint of a smile touched Ryuu's lips. Somehow that doesn't surprise me. They continued through the 32nd floor, eventually reaching the passage leading downward. Before descending, Ryuu paused. The 33rd floor, the heart, will be dangerous, she warned. Even without Thanatos' interference, it's a challenging environment. The energy concentration affects monsters, making them more aggressive and resilient. And with his interference, we should expect the worst, she said simply. Are you prepared? Naruto nodded, his expression turning serious. Let's do this. They descended into the 33rd floor, immediately confronted by a dramatic change in environment. The corridor opened into a vast cavern, the ceiling lost in darkness above. Crystal formations the size of buildings rose from the floor, pulsing with vivid blue energy that flowed through visible channels in the ground, like veins carrying luminescent blood. The air itself felt charged, thick with power that raised the hair on Naruto's arms. His sage senses nearly overloaded with input, forcing him to adjust his perception to filter the overwhelming energy signatures. Wow, he breathed, taking in the spectacular sight. You weren't kidding about this being the heart. This is just the outer chamber, Ryuu said quietly. The true core lies further in. They moved carefully through the crystalline forest, staying low and using the formations as cover. Naruto sensed multiple presences scattered throughout the chamber, some monsters, others definitely human or demi-human. Thanatos's followers, he whispered, indicating a group of cloaked figures working around a particularly large crystal. They're installing something. Ryuu observed the activity with narrowed eyes. Some kind of devices. They're tapping directly into the energy flow. As they watched, one of the devices activated, glowing with sickly red light that contrasted with the natural blue energy of the dungeon. Where the two colors met, the blue seemed to distort and darken. They're corrupting it, Naruto realized. Introducing some kind of foreign energy into the system. We need to see the core, Ryuu decided. If similar devices are installed there. They circled the outer chamber, avoiding detection through careful timing and the occasional use of Naruto's transformation technique to blend with the environment. What they observed grew increasingly concerning, dozens of extraction devices placed at key junction points, all pulsing with that same corrupting red energy. Eventually, they reached a passage leading deeper into the floor. Unlike the manufactured corridors of upper levels, this was more organic, almost like entering a massive artery. The walls pulsed rhythmically, and the energy flow beneath their feet intensified. The core chamber is ahead, Ryuu whispered. It will be heavily guarded if Thanatos is conducting a ritual there. Naruto formed a shadow clone. Let me scout ahead. If I'm detected, only my clone disperses. The clone transformed into a small dungeon bat, a common sight in these depths, and fluttered down the passage. Minutes later, Naruto received its memories when it deliberately dispelled. 6 guards at the entrance, he reported. And inside. He frowned, processing the clone's observations. Some kind of altar has been constructed in the center of the core. There's a figure on it, not moving, might be unconscious or restrained. A sacrifice? Ryuu's expression darkened. Some rituals require a living vessel to channel power. We need to get in there, Naruto said decisively. Free whoever they've captured and disrupt whatever they're setting up. Agreed, but we need a distraction. Ryuu surveyed their surroundings thoughtfully. The energy extraction points are networked. If one were to malfunction. Naruto grinned. I like how you think. He created another shadow clone. Find one of those devices on the opposite side of the chamber. Make it very unhappy. The clone nodded and disappeared into the crystal forest. Minutes later, an explosion rocked the cavern, followed by alarms and shouts as Thanatos's followers rushed to contain the damage. Now, Ryuu urged, moving swiftly toward the core passage. They encountered 2 remaining guards at the entrance, both distracted by the commotion. Ryuu moved with blinding speed, her sword a silver blur as she incapacitated one guard while Naruto took down the other with a precise strike to the neck. Nice teamwork, he commented as they entered the core passage. Don't celebrate yet, she replied grimly. The worst is ahead. The passage opened into a breathtaking chamber that truly deserved the name, Heart. A massive crystal structure dominated the center, a pulsing, multifaceted formation the size of a small building. Blue energy coursed through it in visible waves, spreading outward through channels that resembled arteries and veins. Around this natural wonder, Thanatos' followers had constructed an elaborate ritual site. Metal frameworks penetrated the crystal at strategic points, each connected to devices similar to those in the outer chamber but larger and more complex. Red energy flowed from these devices into the crystal core, creating disturbing patterns of corruption within the natural blue. And at the center, as Naruto had seen through his clone, was an altar. Upon it lay a figure, a young female adventurer, unconscious or in stasis, with ritual markings covering her exposed skin. "We're too late to prevent the setup," Ryuu whispered. "But the ritual itself hasn't begun." Naruto studied the chamber, counting 4 attendants monitoring the devices and 2 more preparing the altar. No sign of Thanatos himself, which seemed odd for such an important operation. "I'll free the sacrifice, you disable the devices," Naruto suggested. Ryuu nodded. "On my signal." She withdrew a small object from her pouch, a magic stone with unusual markings. With precise aim, she threw it high into the chamber, where it detonated in a blinding flash of light. As the attendants shouted in confusion, temporarily blinded, Naruto and Ryuu launched into action. Naruto dashed directly for the altar while Ryuu moved with incredible speed between the extraction devices, slicing through critical components with her blade. Naruto reached the unconscious adventurer, quickly checking her condition. She was alive but deeply unconscious, magical restraints binding her to the altar. He focused chakra into his hand, disrupting the magical circuits that powered the restraints. "Got her," he called to Ryuu, lifting the young woman from the altar. "How are those devices coming?" "3 disabled," she replied, her sword slicing through the 4th. "But we have company." Reinforcements poured into the chamber, at least a dozen of Thanatos' followers, armed and clearly enraged at the interruption. Among them stood a tall, pale man whose presence radiated authority and cold purpose. "That's not Thanatos," Ryuu said as she rejoined Naruto. "But that's his high priest, Moros." The priest raised his hand, and the followers halted their advance. "Intruders," he called, his voice echoing unnaturally in the chamber. "You disrupt sacred work. The penalty is death." "Sacred work?" Naruto challenged, still holding the unconscious adventurer. "You mean corrupting the dungeon and kidnapping people for sacrifices? Real holy stuff there." Moros smiled thinly. "You understand nothing of Lord Thanatos' vision. The dungeon is evolution incarnate, a system designed to transform energy into life. We merely redirect that process toward higher purpose. By corrupting it," Ryuu stated flatly, "the imbalance you're creating could collapse the entire dungeon structure." "A small price for transcendence," the priest replied. Then his gaze fixed more intently on Naruto. Your energy signature is unusual. Not blessed by any god of Ororio." Naruto tensed, not liking the calculating look in the man's eyes. "You're the anomaly Lord Thanatos sensed," Moros continued, his excitement growing. "The foreign entity whose arrival disrupted the dungeon's patterns. Your energy, yes, it would be perfect for the ritual." "Sorry, not interested in being a battery for your creepy god," Naruto replied. He glanced at Ryuu. "We need to move." She nodded, understanding his intent. "The South Passage. It connects to the 34th floor. Stop them." Moros commanded. "The Golden One must not escape." The followers charged, weapons raised. Naruto handed the unconscious adventurer to a quickly created shadow clone, freeing himself for combat. "Get her to safety," he instructed the clone. "We'll hold them off." What followed was a chaotic battle through the heart chamber. Naruto and Ryuu fought back to back, their combat styles complementing each other naturally. His power and versatility paired with her precision and speed created a formidable defense. Naruto limited himself to taijutsu and basic ninjutsu, wanting to keep his more distinctive abilities concealed from Thanatos' followers. Even so, he and Ryuu systematically disabled their attackers, fighting toward the southern passage. Almost there, Ryuu called, dispatching another opponent with a precise strike. The passage is just beyond that crystal formation. Suddenly, the entire chamber shuddered. The damaged extraction devices began to spark and emit high-pitched whines. Red and blue energy swirled erratically where the systems had been breached, creating unstable vortices that lashed out with tendrils of power. The system's destabilizing, Ryuu warned. Without controlled extraction, the energy is backflowing into the corrupted channels. Moros, realizing the danger, began shouting orders to his remaining followers. Activate the emergency protocols. Reroute the flow through secondary systems. Too late for that, Naruto muttered, seeing cracks forming in the central crystal. This place is coming down. They made a final push toward the southern passage, Naruto creating a wave of shadow clones to clear the path. As they reached the exit, a massive energy discharge erupted from the central crystal, sending a shockwave throughout the chamber. Move! Naruto grabbed Ryuu's arm, pulling her into the passage as debris began falling behind them. His clone, carrying the rescued adventurer, was just ahead. They ran through the artery-like corridor as the instability spread, the walls convulsing around them. The passage opened into another large chamber, apparently part of the 34th floor, where they finally paused to catch their breath. That wasn't part of the plan, Naruto admitted, looking back at the now partially collapsed passage. But at least we disrupted their ritual. Temporarily, Ryuu cautioned. The devices we destroyed can be replaced. And now Thanatos knows someone is interfering. More importantly, he knows about me specifically, Naruto added. That priest seemed pretty excited about my energy signature. Ryuu nodded grimly. Moros recognized your potential value to their ritual. That makes you a target. The shadow clone approached with the still unconscious adventurer. She's stable, but deeply sedated with something magical. Might need specialized healing. We'll have to take her with us, Ryuu decided. The floor of silence is actually safer now than trying to return upward through Thanatos' territory. They took a moment to treat minor injuries and assess their situation. The 34th floor was less developed than the heart chamber, more natural caverns than structured dungeon. Monster signs were minimal, suggesting most had fled the energy disturbances. How much farther to the floor of silence? Naruto asked as they prepared to move on. 3 more floors, Ryuu replied. The path gets less straightforward from here. The 36th floor in particular is challenging. More challenging than what we just did. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Different challenges. The 36th floor contains what adventurers call the White Palace, a labyrinth of constantly shifting white stone. Many have become permanently lost within it. Sounds fun, Naruto said dryly. Any shortcuts? Actually, yes. Ryuu gestured toward the eastern wall of the chamber. There's a hidden passage used by experienced explorers. It bypasses most of the 35th floor and enters the White Palace at a more favorable location. With the unconscious adventurer carefully carried by Naruto's clone, they set off toward the hidden passage. Despite the disruption they'd caused, Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only glimpsed a fraction of Thanatos' operation. The systematic corruption of the dungeon's energy system suggested a plan far larger than a single ritual. As they traveled, he observed Ryuu with newfound respect. Her combat abilities, dungeon knowledge, and strategic thinking confirmed his suspicions. She had once been a top-tier adventurer, likely level 5 or higher based on her performance. So, he said as they navigated a particularly narrow section of cavern, you going to tell me your real story now? After what we just survived together? Ryuu glanced at him, her expression guarded but less closed than before. What makes you think there's more to tell? Besides the fact that you fight like an elite adventurer, no hidden passages through the deep floors, and recognized Thanatos' high priest on sight? Naruto raised an eyebrow. Just a hunch. She was silent for several steps, seeming to weigh her options. Finally, she sighed lightly. I was once part of Astria Familia. We were, justice-focused. Targeting criminal elements within Ororio. Was? Naruto prompted gently when she paused. They're gone now, she said simply, pain briefly visible in her eyes. I alone survived. The weight behind those words told Naruto everything he needed to know. Loss, grief, likely revenge, all familiar territories to him. I'm sorry, he said sincerely. Losing your family, that's a pain I understand. She looked at him with new awareness, perhaps recognizing the genuine empathy in his voice. You've lost people too. It wasn't a question, but he nodded anyway. My parents died the day I was born. My mentor, my friends. I've had my share of losses. Yet you maintain that optimism, she observed. That light. What's the alternative? Naruto shrugged. Let the darkness win. That's not really an option. Something shifted in Ryu's expression, a softening, perhaps even the faintest admiration. No, I suppose it isn't. They reached the hidden passage Ryu had mentioned, a narrow fissure in the rock face that would have been easily overlooked without specific knowledge. It led into a tight tunnel that sloped steeply downward, requiring careful navigation. This bypasses most of the 35th floor, Ryu explained as they descended. It was discovered by a mapping specialist from Hermes Familia years ago, but kept relatively secret. And you just happen to know about it? Astria Familia maintained relationships with various information brokers, she said matter-of-factly. Knowledge meant survival in our line of work. The passage eventually widened into a small cavern with multiple exits. Ryu chose the southwestern tunnel without hesitation, leading them through increasingly complex terrain. The dungeon structure here showed less intelligent design and more natural formation, as if they were traveling through areas the dungeon consciousness paid less attention to. After what seemed like hours of descent, they emerged into a startlingly different environment, a vast chamber of gleaming white stone that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Architectural elements resembling columns, arches, and staircases created a surreal cityscape, beautiful yet disorienting. The White Palace, Ryu announced. We've reached the 36th floor. Naruto stared in amazement at the dreamlike landscape. It's not what I expected from a monster-filled dungeon. The dungeon contains many such anomalies, Ryu explained. Areas that defy its general pattern of hostility. Some theorize these spaces represent something the dungeon itself is trying to understand or recreate. Like memories? Naruto suggested. Ryu looked thoughtful. Perhaps. Though whose memories would a dungeon possess? They proceeded cautiously through the white structures, Ryu guiding them with confidence despite the confusing layout. Occasionally, the palace lived up to its reputation for disorientation, staircases that led to unexpected locations, corridors that curved back on themselves, doorways that opened to different areas than they had minutes before. How do you navigate this place? Naruto asked after they backtracked from a particularly frustrating loop. Patterns in the floor markings, Ryu pointed to subtle variations in the white stone beneath their feet. They remain consistent even when the architecture changes. As they traversed the bizarre landscape, Naruto's clone reported that the rescued adventurer was showing signs of waking. They paused in a relatively secure alcove to check her condition. The young woman, human, with short brown hair and explorer's gear, stirred restlessly, her eyes moving beneath closed lids. The sedation is wearing off, Ryu observed. We should be prepared for disorientation or panic when she wakes. Almost on cue, the adventurer's eyes snapped open. She immediately tried to sit up, confusion and fear evident in her expression. Easy, Naruto said, keeping his voice calm and reassuring. You're safe now. We rescued you from Thanatos's followers. She stared at them with wide eyes. Who are you? Where am I? I'm Naruto, this is Ryuu. We're adventurers who found you being held captive. He offered her a water flask. What's your name? Emma, she said hesitantly, accepting the water. Emma Garcia. I'm with Mayak Familia. What happened, Emma? Ryuu asked gently. How did Thanatos' people capture you? Emma took a shaky breath. We were exploring the 27th floor when monsters drove us into an ambush. Cloaked figures, they used some kind of sleep magic. When I woke briefly, I was being carried deeper into the dungeon. She looked around, finally registering her surroundings. Is this, the White Palace? Yes, Ryuu confirmed. We're taking you to the 37th floor, then back to the surface. The floor of silence. Emma looked alarmed. But why? Wouldn't going upward be safer? Normally, yes, Naruto explained. But we disrupted Thanatos' operation, and they're likely hunting us on the upper floors. Plus, we need to investigate something on the 37th floor anyway. Emma seemed to accept this logic, if reluctantly. I've heard stories about the floor of silence. They say it drives some adventurers mad. Only those who fear what silence reveals, Ryuu said cryptically. Can you walk? We should continue moving. Emma nodded, shakily rising to her feet. I think so. My familia will be worried sick. How long was I captured? We don't know, Naruto admitted. But the ritual setup looked recent. Probably no more than a day or two. They resumed their journey through the White Palace, now moving more carefully to accommodate Emma's weakened state. As they traveled, Naruto questioned her further about what she might have overheard during her captivity. They kept talking about a convergence, Emma recalled. Something about energy patterns aligning for the first time in centuries. One of them mentioned a deadline, that if the ritual wasn't completed by the next new moon, they'd have to wait another millennium. Celestial timing, Ryuu murmured. Many ancient rituals require specific astronomical alignments. Did you hear anything about what the ritual was meant to accomplish? Naruto asked. Emma frowned, concentrating. They said something about transcending the divine compact and releasing the true arcanum. Does that mean anything to you? Ryuu's expression turned grave. The divine compact is the agreement that limits God's powers in the mortal realm. If Thanatos is seeking to break those restrictions, he could use his full godly powers in this world, Naruto finished, understanding the implications. That would be bad news for everyone, not just adventurers. Very bad, Ryuu confirmed. Gods restricted their own powers precisely because their true might would devastate the mortal realm. A fully unleashed deity could potentially destroy Ororio entirely. The gravity of the situation settled over them as they continued through the White Palace. What had begun as an investigation into dungeon anomalies had escalated into a threat that could endanger the entire city and its inhabitants. After navigating the disorienting labyrinth for several more hours, they finally reached its southern edge. A grand staircase of pure white stone descended into darkness, the passage to the 37th floor. The floor of silence begins at the bottom of these stairs, Ryuu informed them. Once we descend, verbal communication will become difficult, if not impossible. We should establish hand signals, Naruto suggested, demonstrating a few basic shinobi signs. For danger, stop, proceed, and so on. After rehearsing the signals until all three were comfortable, they prepared for the descent. Emma looked particularly nervous. I've never been this deep before, she admitted. My familia usually stays above the 20th floor. Stay close to us, Naruto reassured her. We'll get you through safely. They descended the white staircase, watching as the ethereal glow of the palace gradually faded behind them. The temperature dropped noticeably, and the air took on a strange quality, thinner yet somehow more substantial against the skin. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, the sounds began to diminish. The echo of their footsteps dulled, the subtle rustle of clothing muted, even the sound of their breathing seemed to fade away. By the time they reached the bottom of the staircase, near complete silence enveloped them. They had reached the floor of silence. The environment here was unlike any other floor they'd encountered. Smooth, dark stone composed the floor and walls, with no visible crystal formations or light sources. Yet somehow the chamber wasn't dark, a diffuse, sourceless illumination provided just enough visibility to navigate. Naruto immediately felt the change in natural energy, the same resonance he'd experienced upon his arrival in this world. It surrounded him, harmonizing with his own chakra in a way that felt almost like recognition. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the sensation wash over him. When he opened them, he found Ryuu watching him intently. She pointed to her eyes, then to him, a clear question in her expression. Naruto nodded, then deliberately entered sage mode. The golden pigmentation appeared around his eyes, and he felt the natural energy flow into him with unprecedented ease, almost eagerly, as if the floor itself was offering its power. Ryu's eyes widened slightly in recognition, confirming Naruto's suspicion that she had indeed sensed something similar during her previous visit. She gestured toward the center of the chamber, indicating they should proceed. The floor of silence lived up to its name. Even deliberate attempts to create noise, clapping hands, stomping feet, produced only the faintest sounds, as if the very air consumed acoustic energy. Emma looked increasingly uncomfortable, staying close to Naruto's side as they moved forward. The floor extended into a massive open area with no visible monsters or obstacles, just smooth, dark stone stretching in all directions. Yet Naruto sensed purpose in the seemingly empty space, a deliberate quality to the silence that suggested observation rather than absence. As they reached what appeared to be the center of the chamber, marked by subtle circular patterns in the floor, Naruto felt a distinct shift in the energy flow. The natural power began to spiral around him, responding to his sage mode in a way that seemed almost communicative. He knelt, placing his palm flat against the floor, and channeled his chakra downward. The response was immediate and dramatic, lines of blue light spread outward from his hand, tracing the circular patterns and extending beyond to form complex geometric shapes across the entire chamber. Emma's expression was one of amazement and fear, while Ryuu watched with intense interest. She approached, kneeling beside Naruto and placing her own hand near his. Though she lacked his chakra abilities, the floor seemed to recognize her as well, creating a smaller but similar pattern around her palm. Naruto looked at her questioningly. She nodded, confirming his unspoken theory. They both resonated with this floor in similar ways, despite their different origins and abilities. The patterns continued to spread, eventually covering the entire visible floor in glowing blue lines. Then, at the center where Naruto and Ryuu knelt, a portion of the floor began to recede, revealing a staircase descending into previously hidden depths. Emma backed away, clearly alarmed, but Naruto gestured reassuringly. He pointed to himself and Ryuu, then to the staircase, followed by a signal for Emma to remain at the entrance. She nodded, relieved not to descend further into this strange environment. With a quick glance at each other, Naruto and Ryuu descended the newly revealed staircase. The silence grew even more profound as they went deeper, if such a thing were possible. At the bottom, they found a small chamber unlike anything in the documented dungeon. The walls were inscribed with symbols Naruto recognized from his own world, ancient script related to natural energy and the sage arts. In the center stood a simple stone pedestal bearing a small crystal orb that pulsed with rhythmic blue light. Ryuu approached the pedestal cautiously, examining the inscriptions without touching them. Her expression suggested she recognized elements of the writing as well, though perhaps from a different context. Naruto joined her, studying the familiar symbols. They described a junction point between realms, a place where different worlds could connect through the harmonization of natural energy. The orb, according to the inscriptions, was both key and gateway, a focal point for travelers between dimensions. Understanding dawned on him. This chamber explained his arrival in this world, not an accident or enemy attack, but the resonance between his sage abilities and this interdimensional nexus. Something about the natural energy he commanded had activated this gateway, pulling him through during his battle with Kaguya. He looked at Ryuu, wishing they could communicate more effectively. She seemed to understand his frustration, pointing to the orb, then to him, raising her eyebrows in question. Naruto nodded, then hesitated. The inscription suggested the orb could potentially open a path back to his world, a way home. But using it might require significant energy and produce unpredictable effects, especially with the dungeon systems already destabilized by Thanatos' interference. After a moment's consideration, he shook his head, pointing upward to indicate they should return to Emma first. Ryuu nodded in agreement, seeming to understand his caution. As they turned to leave, however, the chamber suddenly trembled. The blue light of the orb flickered, briefly turning the sickly red color they'd seen in Thanatos' extraction devices. Then the original blue returned, though pulsing more erratically than before. Ryuu's expression turned alarmed. She gestured urgently toward the stairs, indicating they should leave immediately. Naruto agreed. Whatever was happening, the instability in the dungeon's energy system was affecting even this isolated chamber. They hurried back up the stairs to find Emma looking panicked. She pointed frantically toward the main entrance to the floor, where shadowy figures were now visible, at least a dozen of them, moving with clear purpose toward the central area where the blue patterns still glowed. Thanatos' followers had found them, likely drawn by the energy surge when Naruto activated the floor patterns. With quick hand signals, Naruto coordinated their response. They needed to reach an exit without being surrounded. Ryuu indicated a secondary passage on the eastern side of the chamber, less direct than the main entrance but potentially unguarded. They moved swiftly but carefully, using the minimal lighting to their advantage. The followers carried strange devices that emitted faint red glows, probably sensors for detecting energy signatures. If they activated any significant abilities, they'd be immediately located. When one of the search parties turned toward their position, Naruto made a quick decision. He created 3 shadow clones with minimal chakra signature, transforming them to resemble himself, Ryuu, and Emma. The clones moved visibly toward the western passage, drawing the attention of the searchers. While the followers pursued the decoys, the Ryuu trio reached the eastern exit undetected. The passage beyond was narrower and less traversed than the main route, winding upward through what appeared to be a maintenance tunnel of sorts. Once they'd put sufficient distance between themselves and the floor of silence, the sound-dampening effect gradually diminished. When they could finally speak again, Emma was the first to break the silence. "What was that?" she demanded in a hushed voice. "The floor lit up when you touched it." "It's complicated," Naruto replied, keeping his voice low. "That floor has a special connection to natural energy, the same kind I use for some of my abilities." "And the chamber beneath?" Ryuu asked, her expression intense. "Those inscriptions." "A gateway between worlds," Naruto confirmed. "I think that's how I arrived here, through that nexus point." The symbols described it as a junction where dimensions can connect through harmonized natural energy. "Then you could potentially use it to return to your world," Ryuu observed, her tone carefully neutral. "Maybe," Naruto acknowledged. "But not with the dungeon's energy system so unstable. And definitely not with Thanatos trying to use that instability for his ritual." "So what now?" Emma asked. "Those people are still searching for us. We need to get back to the surface," Ryuu decided. "Report what we found to the guild and warn them about Thanatos' plan." "There's more," Naruto added. "When the orb flickered red, I sensed the same corruption we saw in the heart chamber. Whatever Thanatos is doing, it's affecting even the floor of silence. If that gateway destabilizes completely, it could create unpredictable connections between worlds," Ryuu finished, understanding the implications. "Potentially allowing things from other dimensions to cross over. Or worse," Naruto said grimly. "If he's trying to break the divine compact, he might be planning to use the gateway's power as part of his ritual." They continued upward through the maintenance passage, which Ryuu explained was used primarily by dungeon maintenance teams, specialists from the guild who studied and monitored the dungeon's natural processes. "These passages exist throughout the dungeon," she explained. They're kept secret from most adventurers to prevent misuse, but certain familias with research authority are granted access. Let me guess, Astria Familia had that authority? Naruto asked. For investigation purposes, yes. Ryuu led them through a junction where multiple tunnels converged. This network will take us to the 24th floor, bypassing the White Palace entirely. Handy, Naruto commented. Why doesn't everyone use these? They're not completely safe, Ryuu cautioned. Less monster activity, but the dungeon sometimes reclaims sections without warning. Maintenance teams have disappeared. That sobering thought kept them alert as they continued their ascent. The tunnels were clearly artificial additions to the dungeon structure, reinforced walls, placed support beams, occasional equipment caches. Yet even here, signs of the dungeon's living nature were evident in the way organic material seemed to grow around and sometimes through the constructed elements. They reached the 24th floor several hours later, emerging through a concealed door into the safe zone where Naruto had camped previously. The encampment was busier now, filled with adventurers discussing the unusual tremors and energy fluctuations felt throughout the middle floors. Saying the 33rd floor collapsed, guild issuing emergency restriction orders, monsters acting crazy, totally berserk, Ryuu pulled up her hood, obscuring her features. We should avoid attention. If Thanatos has influence in Ororio, word of our return could reach him quickly. They skirted the main encampment, using less traveled paths to begin their ascent toward the surface. Emma, now recovered enough to move independently, kept pace with them, her expression determined. My familia needs to know what's happening, she said as they climbed. Miyake-sama has extensive knowledge of potions and elixirs, he might understand the corruption formula Thanatos is using. Good thinking, Naruto agreed. And I should inform the guild about what we found on the 37th floor. Carefully, Ryuu cautioned. The connection between the floor of silence and dimensional travel would attract unwanted attention from multiple factions. As they ascended through the upper floors, they encountered increased guild presence, officials documenting anomalies, setting up warning markers, and establishing checkpoints. At one such checkpoint on the 15th floor, they were stopped by guild employees. Identification, requested a stern-looking official. Naruto presented his provisional adventurer pass, while Emma showed her Miyake Familia emblem. Ryuu kept her hood low, offering a worn adventurer tag that Naruto suspected wasn't her current identification. The official examined their credentials, then consulted a list. Emma Garcia of Miyake Familia. Your captain reported you missing 3 days ago. You're on the emergency search list. I was abducted by followers of Thanatos, Emma explained. These adventurers rescued me from a ritual site on the 33rd floor. The official's eyes widened. That's valuable information. We'll need a full report. We'll provide one at the surface, Naruto interjected. For now, we need to continue upward. The situation is urgent. After a moment's consideration, the official nodded. Proceed, but report directly to guild headquarters upon arrival. There's been an emergency session called for all familia representatives this evening. They continued upward with renewed urgency. The news of an emergency session suggested the guild was taking the dungeon disturbances seriously, finally recognizing the coordinated threat rather than treating them as isolated anomalies. By late afternoon, they reached Babel Tower and emerged into Ororio. The city seemed unusually tense, with increased guard presence and adventurers gathering in concerned groups. We should split up, Ryuu suggested. Emma to Miyake Familia, Naruto to the guild, and I'll return to the hostess to avoid drawing attention. Wait, Naruto said, reluctant to separate so abruptly. We should arrange to meet later. Compare notes on what we learn. Ryuu hesitated, then nodded. The eastern garden behind the hostess. Midnight. It's private and Mia doesn't monitor it. With that arrangement made, they parted ways. Emma thanked them both profusely before hurrying toward Miyake Familia's headquarters, while Ryuu disappeared into the crowd with practiced anonymity. Naruto headed directly for the guild, finding the headquarters busier than he'd ever seen it. Adventurers from numerous familias crowded the lobby, while officials rushed. Something went wrong with this response, please try again. Let's continue with the next chapter now. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.